Hello, everybody. Welcome to Irongeek Cast number 178. Check it. We'll do it live. Okay, unfortunately, a lot of my main contributors aren't around anymore, and really, this cast should have been called Caprico and Israel Cast, and then it should have been called Frank Cast or Trez Cast. But they couldn't add anything to show notes, and quite frankly, I didn't have any intersect topics I really want to talk about directly. So I decided to open this up to more people, and that's one of the reasons you'll see Falinor there. How do you pronounce that? Is it
Falinor?
Falinor?
What happened?
Or asshole. Both works.
What happened?
What happened to Israel?
I just haven't seen him on the cast in a while.
Oh, okay.
I think he's been busy with work. That's been a lot of it, I think.
I know I've been pretty inconsistent with the cast as well.
Inconsistent lizard.
Yes.
Off chasing bugs and millworm and stuff like that.
I've been missing. I've been playing teacher and attorney.
Number 2 sounds way more fun than number 1.
No.
Although try to combine the two. Threaten to sue your students.
Oh, you have to do homeschool stuff?
Say what?
You have to do the homeschool.
Yeah, well, I was homeschooling my daughter, and it ended up being really, worked out really well. First time ever, she got straight A's. But, you know, some of that also has to do with I have a little bit more legal authority over now. I have more authority over my daughter.
We all live on YouTube.
Huh?
We all live on YouTube now.
Oh, that's fine. Trust me, they know. I have more legal authority over my daughter now that I'm divorced than I did when I was married. So
I'm a little confused. What exactly? Like, okay, she's being homeschooled, but then she has straight A's. Aren't you the one giving her straight A's?
Nah. So the way they've been doing it with this COVID thing, it depends on each school. They've had it set up different, and now they're changing a little bit more rolling into the new school year. So when they first sent all the kids home, it was very ad hoc. They didn't know what they were doing. They were shooting from the hip. And with my youngest, they pretty much were using Google Classroom as like a quasi grade management, content management system, and other interactive online educational tools. They weren't getting face-to-face instruction with the teacher. Pretty much, hey, here's a course lesson, go do it, yada, yada, yada. And there wasn't a lot of explanation or anything from the teacher, so I stepped in as the teacher and worked with my daughter one-on-one throughout the entire thing. I pretty much taught her throughout the day. Me and my girlfriend shipped her a laptop with a digital pen display, not touchscreen, because that'll sense your palm when you're trying to write on it and garbage like that. And so we set up her phone on a tripod beside that and did screen sharing so we could ink on each other's screen. So I would write, like, for instance, when we were doing fractions and decimals, I would write the fraction, she would write the decimal beside it, and vice versa, yada, yada, yada. And it was completely fair. I didn't cut her any slack.
All right. So I just misunderstood what you meant by homeschooling then.
So yeah, no, not homes. We may end up going on that model down the road. Before, I wasn't a huge fan of homeschooling, but what we did worked out very well for my daughter. And going into this new school year, she's going to be doing that at least the first 9 weeks. Now, the older kids, they're going to actually have like live streaming from the teachers to the children, so a little bit different. My youngest one, though, it'll still be the same model as they did ad hoc last year, so I'll be able to pretty much provide most of the instruction, and she'll be able to take the test online, and I don't help her at all on the test online. And it's really cool because it's really upped her confidence. She's so proud of herself. She's like beating the piss out of other kids in her grade. She's like, those are the smart kids. I'm like, and you're beating the shit out of them, honey. Go.
So you're doing homeschooling that is how do I put it this way, aided by a teaching organization or a school.
Yeah, well, in this case, it's actually provided by all the material and everything's provided by the public school that she attended before the whole COVID thing. So
I remember seeing some Twitter drama a while back about people whining they not liking homeschool, and quite frankly, how good homeschool is largely dependent on who's doing the homeschooling. Like, I see some people talk about how bad homeschooling is, but the majority of people seem to think the results are pretty good, though you have the occasional time when homeschooling doesn't work out for somebody.
Well, I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages to it, obviously. I mean, if you, the parent, are the instructor and it's not being facilitated by an organization or a school district, and you're cheese dicking it, obviously garbage in, garbage out. The kid isn't going to retain or learn anything. Alternatively, also though, and this is universal with homeschooling, and I think with some private schools to a degree too, the kids might not get the proper amount of socialization that they need. Now, with my daughter, she's involved in some extracurricular activities, which counteracts the isolation from being homeschooled, or whatever we want to call it right now, remote learning. So it works out. But I mean, I'm sure there's some kids that are very dependent and need that socialization to where it might not be a good idea for them. I mean, your mileage may vary with everybody.
Well, I'll go ahead and tell you, I've already done substantial amounts of research into the Department of Education, and as part of a process of me building my own college, and the whole system's just broken. Like, to put it into perspective, it's cost me $5,000 so far to build my own 2-year college. And so the cost of building a college versus the cost of buying one or going to one is just ridiculously different. So they're way overinflated in cost. I can tell you that for sure. And then curriculums are on a lease basis. So you just pay a flat fee to rent the curriculums, and that's their entire degree program. They just get straight from Pearson.
I'm very
or
confused.
McGraw
What do you
Hill.
mean by rent the degree curriculum, and who are you paying this $5,000 to?
So you have to pay for your licensure. So in order to build a college, you have to pay the state, and then you have to have your entire school itself, the base template of the school, audited by a licensing body. And then after your licensing body reviews your packet, then they'll approve your packet, and you're granted a license to have a college. Then after you have your college, you're an unaccredited college, and then you have to take on students and then get those students through your curriculum, and then they graduate the program, and then based on your success as a teaching institution and the student's success after the fact of graduation, you're then graded in a time frame based on your curriculum time frame of 2, 4, 6, 8, or whatever your curriculum degree pathway is. You're then graded by your accrediting body, and then if you pass that assessment, then you're granted your accreditation by that accrediting body. And so for me, it's ASET because that's my 2-year program.
Well,
That's how they're built, and then you literally can rent the entire curriculum that you're going to teach from someone like McGraw Hill. They have entire curriculum packets that colleges typically pick up, and that's where all those PowerPoints and books and all the recommendations that come with it. That's where they come from. They're already prefabricated. You can literally build a college, and I don't mean that in like build one. I mean that like build a bear. You can templatize building an entire college for almost no effort whatsoever.
no, I mean, at that point, no effort in, you're not going to exactly have a great product.
Well, the product is decent quality, but more specifically, it's building a system to build a degree pathway. For me, I'm having all of my stuff custom made from professors that I know that are quality based on research paper reviews. But that being said, it's a huge process and a huge nightmare in terms of just process. It's extremely process heavy and stupid amounts of paperwork. You have to have a damn packet for everything. Like wipe your ass, how you do your supply,
So,
how you do grading, everything.
so can I go to your
Disciplined
college and
process.
get me a 2-year degree in gender studies?
Yeah, you totally could. You could build your own college, then go to it and get your own degree from your own college. You totally could.
The Adrian Crenshaw University of Gender Studies.
I'll have
Yeah.
you know, the person who came up with the idea of intersectionality, her last name was Crenshaw.
Yeah, apparently.
That's funny. But yeah, getting back on topic a little bit. Sorry about that tangent there. But in terms of homeschooling is superior to public schooling, and private charter schools are superior to homeschooling in terms of success rates and performance rates on accredited tests, as well as state-based tests and international testing bodies.
Really depends. I mean, that's you can't really
Overall,
make
from a median average, that's the data, like published by Department of Education.
during what period of time, and also
I
you
think
have,
a 5-year time frame.
you have to keep in mind that the families that did homeschooling even back before the pandemic had the luxury of parents who could had enough time to dedicate to their children to do homeschooling and didn't require them to be outside of the house. Not that many families had that kind of luxury.
Yeah, so obviously homeschooling degraded, but public school is so bad. You're comparing like what type of Ferrari you have versus a Prius. It doesn't matter what Ferrari you drive; it's still vastly superior to public school. No Child Left Behind has absolutely devastated any form of performance you could possibly ever achieve compared to any other platform for teaching, including YouTube, which is depressing. So
Yeah.
self-taught, you can still self-taught faster and more effectively than you can going to a public school, because the issue is it's effectively like a dog sled team, and they built their system like a dog sled team. And the easiest way to visualize it is it's a dog sled team, and the slowest dog is a boulder, and all the dogs have to chase and pull the boulder, and so the team moves as fast as the boulder does.
That would differ dramatically from region to region, because I'm aware that there are some public schools in some not so well off areas that are so kind of horrible. These high schools don't even have a algebra course, let alone a calculus course.
Oh yeah, that's because they don't have the books. Yeah, I'm well aware. I have schools in my area that are just like that I donate stuff to,
So I
buy
mean,
books and computers and stuff for them.
so yes, there are absolutely public schools that don't really, that are pretty much just glorified daycares.
Yeah, they really are.
But I mean, that's obviously very, very, very region specific. Not every public school is going to be a garbage fire. In some cases, literally.
Well, you have to remember that the average median reading level in the United States is 8th grade, and that comes from public schools. And so public schools are never leaving the K-12
By the way,
bracket for performance.
Powder Tomei has a good idea in the chat. The best type of education is leaving your kids in the woods to find their way back home.
Now, don't be cruel. You have to give them you have to give them a honey badger or a wolf to look after them and raise them as if they're one of their own.
Yes. And
Come on, you got to have some supervision.
Join in so he can express his opinions, because he doesn't think that homeschool always necessarily works out.
No, of course it doesn't always work out. Not every parent is really cut out to be a teacher. Not every parent is smart enough to know even at a grade school level, and to know even grade school level material. So, yeah. Anyway, I do believe the original topic was, what the efficacy of some of students learning over streaming versus in person with the socialization aspect, and yeah, there's going to be some kids that are very different. I'm sure you all have heard of things like a visual learner versus hands-on learner, or versus like an auditory learner, and well, it's some students are going to suffer in a streaming format, a remote format that would do better in person, and some maybe vice versa. The question is more so what the numbers are going to be, and that's only time will tell there, and that's going to be hard to measure considering a lot of courses are being rewritten to be remote friendly that were not before. So it's not going to be an apples to apples comparison until the courses have been fully rewritten and adjusted.
Oh, by the way, for those new to the cast, we have show notes. If you go to YouTube, it should be in the description. And if you have anything you want to add to there, send it to me in the chat, or you can request access to the show notes if you're Raul or Folinar, and you can edit them and add some items if you have links to anything we're talking about that might be of interest to people.
Yeah, I'll kick over some resource links. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm open to the idea of homeschooling. Just a matter if you have the time to actually do it. Unfortunately, it looks like a lot of people won't have to make time. And
well, the thing you have to remember about homeschooling is you can, in a lot of the programs, you can actually leverage your own teachers. And so one of the things that you can do is to say, for instance, the 5 of us, say, for instance, each of us has kids, and we'll pretend they're all in the same age bracket. Or they're not even in the same age bracket, depending on the level of quality of the teacher. We could collectively get together and say, okay, well, we're going to split the cost contractually of paying a full-time teacher to teach all of our children on a one-on-one basis. And so we could get together and say, okay, well, the base salary will be 120K. Well, we'll split the 120K 5 ways annual salary, and we'll go pick up a high-end teacher from a local college, and they'll teach our children all K through 12, and they'll start to teach them the college basis for their current curriculums. And so they can do a dual enrollment with the school and start getting into college. And the current record for a master's degree graduation is 14 years old. And so it can totally be done at an incredible level of success. And so imagine being 14 with a master's degree already.
I know someone who got not that young, but got a degree like that very young. There's a certain level of emotional maturity that they never developed.
Well, you have to think about it. Look at the current emotional maturity that we have in today's demonstrated media sources. I mean, you've got guys running around throwing IEDs at federal agents.
Okay.
Clearly people haven't fully developed. So,
well, Adrian.
Yeah.
Look, it's already been established that you should be able to start your own university, and I really hope you seriously give consideration to becoming a PhD in gender studies.
Oh shit! Yeah, that's gonna be.
Yeah. Or what you can do is you can just contract like I'm doing a dean with a PhD in gender studies, or you can get your own and be your own dean.
Are you familiar with the SoCal Squared hoax?
Yes, I am. I believe I first mentioned that to you, didn't I?
Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure. I know. Well, I watched enough media that it popped up a lot. But basically, they wrote a bunch of bullshit papers to get them accepted into various grievance studies, and they had a very good success rate. I think one of the things they did was they took Mein Kampf, parts of Mein Kampf. They replaced all the stuff about Jewish people and put in.
It was an autoethnography about a lesbian becoming radicalized against her whiteness. Whiteness had a capital W, and I can imagine what word that actually was within Mein Kampf. Now, a lot of these excerpts from Mein Kampf, it kept a lot of the bombastic extremist rhetoric. It just took out the references to, World War I Europe, and World War I Germany. And the thing is, Adrian, you say that there were bullshit papers. The problem is that the papers, like the fucking Mein Kampf thing and other stuff, like chaining children to the ground, and during schools, that was a paper that got accepted too. Accepted, peer-reviewed, and published. Remember, Mein Kampf stuff also got peer-reviewed and published. All this stuff blended in extremely well with some gender studies stuff. The papers that get published in those journals are actually that heinous.
Yeah, they had another one that was, what was it, heteronormativity in dog parks, where they said they went around and observed various dogs humping. They also had one about fat bodybuilding.
Yes, the dog rape park culture, where they claim to have investigated the genitals of 10,000 dogs within a 3-month period across 3 different dog parks. Because you can imagine what would be the rate of 3 different researchers going to 3 different dog parks and inspecting dog genitals to reach 10,000 dog genitals within a 3-month period? I have not bothered doing the math. But that didn't get any kind of critique whatsoever. Believe there was a lot of talk about the oppressed dog being humped. It was
got critiques where they made him even stranger.
Well, they'd have to be touchy-feeling up on like 14 dogs per day for 30.5 on an 8-hour basis. So, like 8 hours a day. That's kind of weird.
14 dogs a day? That doesn't make any sense.
At a minimum. Yeah, at a minimum. I think that's actually, no, hang on. Let me redo the math on that. Let me rescope that.
Remember, I said 10,000, not 1,000.
Yeah. All right. So that's all right. So 8 hours. All right. Yeah, 8 hours, 30 dogs. I said 90 days.
Correct.
All right, so it'll be 91.5.
We're calculating dog humping in a paper that was made up. Actually, they got apparently a couple of them. Well, at least one of them, Peter Boghossian, he had some problems with his university. Investigating him because of it. I think he came out mostly in the clear, though technically he did commit some plagiarism because he took parts of Mein Kampf, and he did fabricate data, but that was kind of what they had to do to make up.
I believe the primary critique was that they had human subjects in the sense of
so they'd have to do 37 dogs a day each every single day for 91 days straight in order to hit that 90-day bracket. I don't think they actually did that study. That's too many dogs.
No, it's not. Remember, it's unique dogs, as in
that's what I'm saying. It's like you'd have to have 36
park.
unique dogs, and the dog owner would be okay with you touching their hardware,
inspecting the dog's genitals. That many dogs every single day. That is obviously that research paper did not get written.
Yeah, I own a husky kennel. I would never let any random person, even if they're a college student for studies, go up and touch my dogs.
I don't think they had to touch it. I think in the paper they just said they observed. That you can tell a dog's gender, but pretty quickly by
you can't get. You have to get close to a husky to see its hardware.
There's a lot of fur.
A lot of dogs, you're not going to find a genitals like that.
Yeah. Yeah,
unless you're crawling on the ground.
I haven't owned a dog in a while. Actually, I technically have never owned a dog, but my family.
Well, sometimes it can be a little harder to tell because a lot of male dogs are neutered, so you don't have hanging balls down there.
Welcome to Irongeek Cast, where we talk about dog junk.
Yes.
Hey, let's make it relevant. Let's talk about hedgehog junk. There you go. Now it's relevant.
Hedgehog's even harder to tell, though. Hedgehogs are growers, not showers.
Animal husbandry this is not the first time we've talked about animal husbandry in this cast.
Oh, no.
But this time we're not getting personally involved. Oh, sorry.
Or we're not talking about male feminists either, So.
Yeah. And I can make up an InfoSec topic if you'd like.
But toss it into the show notes. I'm willing to discuss whatever because we're kind of like filling in. I just want to reach at least an hour on this thing.
Well, I'm sure y'all. I don't know if you covered this up a week or two within the past few weeks, but apparently, U.S. Cyber Command has been tweeting recently about major vulnerabilities that they want the entire public to patch. Vulnerabilities such as Palo Alto firewalls or F5 big IP.
Oh, that's so bad. Yeah, VPN solutions have been getting beat to hell lately.
Well, those technically aren't VPN devices. Oh, I guess the Palo Alto one could be a VPN device, but it is primarily a firewall. TLDR, patch your shit and just double check, make sure your backbone stuff is not exposed to the internet. Respect the web interfaces. And one thing that's even worse, I would think, so they didn't tweet about SIG-RED. And a vulnerability in Microsoft DNS servers, where with a specially crafted DNS query, you can compromise a DNS server. And considering many Microsoft DNS servers are run on Active Directory controllers, and considering the way DNS works is you typically go all the way up until you query the I forget what's a domain
authoritative?
Yes, the authoritative domain. You could in some cases have someone across the world doing a DNS query on their own network and through a chain of events, the query reaching your network and compromising your shit.
Or I wonder if you could do. I wonder if you can combine it with like DNS reflection amplification as well to have someone else query it.
You can one of the other scenarios I think that might be probably common is just tricking someone into visiting a website that makes their computer do that special DNS query to own their local Windows DNS server.
Oh, but, man, that's impossible to protect against unless you have something external that catches it and filters it.
Yeah, so it's SIG-RED. It's what they call it. And Microsoft is saying it's a wormable vulnerability, really bad. Oh, and I guess another vulnerability I just saw about a few hours ago. I believe Secure Boot is owned on almost all Windows and Linux devices. Let me get the article up. Here we go. CVE 2020-10713, grubbing secure boot the wrong way. They call the vulnerability boot hole. Vulnerability buffer overflow and grub 2. Let's see here. Secure boot typically verifies the firmware of all the components in a computer. Make sure they're signed, they're trusted, so they can, you don't have anything malicious loading and persisting after, refresh your computer. And I guess one of the mitigating factors of this vulnerability, which is a bit more, it's just a bit more of a novel kind of thing. Mitigating factors is, in order for it to be exploited, your computer already has to be owned. So if the computer's owned, this is just an exploit that can give them more persistence.
Okay. You won't throw any of that in the show notes for links for people who want to learn more about it.
Sure. The persistence being you can reflash the firmware on hardware, computer, and even if you reinstall the operating system, you'll still have owned hardware. I'll appreciate that. Well, I guess it really depends how you install the operating system. Anyways, I don't know. I have to look into it a bit more. I just saw this a few hours ago. I didn't fully read up on it.
Yep.
But I do know it's not. It's only exploitable after they have access to the operating system. I'm not quite certain why it affects Windows systems as well, considering it says it's a vulnerability in Grub, which I thought was Grub 2, which I didn't think was installed by default for Windows systems.
Maybe they use something. I don't know which Windows bootloader. Maybe it uses something similar to Grub. Curious. Let me look that up.
Okay then.
Yep, that is that's all I have off the top of my head.
All right. I have another subject matter we was talking about a little bit pre-cast. But keep in mind, don't want to air anything that you don't want people to know about out there in the public. We were talking a little bit about investment stuff. Now, my current investment strategy, I used to put lots in CDs before I realized completely that, you know what? Well, it's safe, well, pretty safe. I wasn't even probably, well, I was probably reaching this a little bit better than inflation rate. Currently, what I got is I have one financial advisor who I have a lot of stuff with because I kind of inherited a financial advisor from my uncle, and the rest of the stuff I have in like S&P 500, and I'm doing basically okay. I've been trying to think about the idea of being able to retire at like 55 or so and living on the 4% rule. Are you all familiar with the 4% rule?
Oh, I am, but it's probably a good idea just to explain it in case anyone listening that doesn't.
Yeah, it's a principle for those that's curious.
Okay, over like various time spans, I think over like different 30-year time spans since the Great Depression or something, on average, the stock market has performed about 7% per year.
It's 7 to 8.67%.
Yeah, and inflation has generally been about 3% each year. So the idea is you could take 4% out each year and keep your principal that keeps adjusting for inflation and still live on that. So let's say you have, I don't know, let's say $1 million in the bank or in investments. I suppose you could take 40 grand out each year. Did I get the math right on that? And live on that.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing I'm planning on doing, though I'm hoping to do it for more than 40 grand a year, because while I could easily live on that, I like, various toys that I want to buy. Also depends on how long you're going to live. Or I'll give this a chance also to pimp a book, Aaron Clary's Poor Richard's Retirement, which is kind of interesting. But what's y'all's take on investments and what's y'all's game strategies?
Well, who wants to go first? I don't mind going first.
I can go first, but I'll probably talk for a little bit. All right. I'm a bit uneasy right now for anything short term. investing wise, given the whole coronavirus thing. I fully anticipate the market is going to have a massive correction in ways that I imagine there will be people jumping off skyscrapers, as a reference to the Great Depression.
It's raining men. Hallelujah, it's raining men. Wait, that was a little too dark, wasn't it? Also, it would probably be raining some women also.
Yeah. Remember, we have a bit more gender parity these days.
Yeah, but also the genders commit suicide in different ways, generally speaking.
Is there PSD? I'm sorry.
But it's my first recommendation for any kind of investing stuff. Pay off your debts, especially credit card debt, first and foremost.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, that is your number one priority there.
Yeah, because pretty much any debt you have is probably at a higher interest rate than most investments you can make, and it's pretty much safe to pay off debt.
Yes, and also you cannot, within the next few years, rely on a 7% return, which is 7% is around the minimum kind of credit card interest rate. I haven't checked the minimums these days because it's dependent on the prime rate, but that should be pretty low. Considering
family members, I'm trying to encourage them, pay off the fucking debts. Like, well, I may need the money immediately soon. I'm like, yeah, but do you ever want to fucking retire? You're going to have student loans sitting.
Oh, it's Charles.
To go ahead and answer that question, the expectation is that it's going to be around a 4% return for the next 10 years. And then on top of that, that's not including dividends, that's standard cap market gain. And that was as per, I do believe, that Jamie Dimon.
Are you talking about the 4% rule again?
No, we're talking about that's what the expected market rate is going to be, is 4%.
Oh, well,
yeah.
The thing is that there's a lot of unknowns. There is the obscene amount of the quantitative easing infinite. All free money
extended today. Yeah.
Was that they said ending it today?
They
what?
Extended it today. They officially announced that they're extending it to an indefinite period of time until the virus is quote unquote over, whatever that means.
Well, that's not what I meant by quantitative easing infinite, but I guess that was the infinite part of it. The infinite part was there was no cap in the amount of money they were going to inject into the economy.
Yeah.
Whereas beforehand they had caps to limit, inflationary pressures.
Yeah, there's now no longer a cap or a duration, whereas previously there was a duration.
So this is highly likely setting us up for another financial crisis in the future within our lifetimes. But one thing at a time. We'll get out of this crisis before we go into our next one.
Who was it? Well, Liz Milano was like ranting on Twitter, just print more money, which doesn't exactly work out, at least for anybody that has savings.
I mean, well, now, if you eat the money, it can work out. Man, eat your green. Eat your green.
Oh, by the way, welcome Charles and Frank to the cast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello.
How goes it?
You're my favorite dude on Twitter. You're like the only reason why I still hang around that cesspool.
Oh man, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get more positivity on Twitter myself.
Yeah. If it wasn't for GoFundMe's where I'm paying for people's cancer treatments and you're every happiness every day, I wouldn't even bother to clock in anymore.
Dude. Dude, this is summer retro, man. We about to do this. Today is Streets of Rage.
Can y'all see me now and hear me?
Yeah.
You still have your avatar up, not your face, but that's okay too.
You can't see my picture? My video?
I see your picture, yes. I don't see video, but I see a picture.
Yeah. I've been doing the Red Team Fit stuff. Red Team, whatever fit. So that's been pretty fun.
I've been doing the I've been doing the DEF CON mud challenge yesterday and today.
Yeah, I miss hanging out with y'all physically. Ah,
Yeah, God, I want to be in Vegas. I know everyone says it's successful, but I have fun at DEF CON. I actually genuinely have fun there.
I have fun too, generally speaking. I haven't been in like 2 years now, but as long as I avoid certain people.
The con is so massive and it's just getting bigger and bigger. It's pretty easy to avoid people if you don't want to see.
Don't go to the Lockpick Village. It's all good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's just so much. Like 2020 is just literally like thrown away. Like,
yeah, I got to go to one con this year.
2020 killed Bilbo. It can go die in a fire.
I got to go to B-Sides Tampa, and that's it.
You going to B-Sides Tampa?
No, that's the only one I've been to this year.
Everything
else got canceled. The only con I know of that hasn't got canceled yet, to my knowledge, is Secure West Virginia in November. And who knows what's going to happen with that?
I know.
Secure West Virginia?
That's the only one. Yeah. I
just remember that. How is it?
It hasn't canceled yet.
2021. It's a lot. I hope stuff is just like relaxed. Yeah, I still got places to go. B-Sides Puerto Rico.
Oh, yes. You should.
Hey, man,
you should come down.
Dude, B-Sides Puerto Rico. No, of course, Nova. We got. I mean, it's just so many. Like, again, Circle City Con, Charm. Like, I got so too many to list. Stock Con.
I don't think I could go to Circle City or B-Sides Charm.
I've never been to Circle. I have a talk at Charm next year. You know, it was supposed to be this year, but they moved it to next year. I've never been to a Circle City conference at all. I only been to the virtual one this year.
I was not thrilled with ThoughtCon with their keynote speaker.
What, with ThoughtCon?
Yeah, their keynote speaker. Yeah, Deviant was going to be the keynote, and
yeah. So
I was going to give it a chance because Miss Malort, Miss Malort. And I'm sure there should be some fun people there. They have a fucking anonymous mask as part of their logo.
But Chicago's awesome anyway. I like Chicago.
I've been to Chicago twice. It's okay. It varies dramatically depending on where you are.
I'm like downtown Chicago's nice.
Salt Stack. You'll need to go to Salt Stack.
Salt Stack? I've never been to Salt Stack. What's up?
Tell me a little bit about Salt Stack, because I see Guardian is running on that now.
Salt Conf. Salt Conf is the shit. Everybody at Salt Stack is an amazing peoples, and it's super fun conference. You're gonna learn so much about salt there. Yeah, I'm not trying to sell their product. I don't work there.
No, talk about it.
It's a great product.
Okay.
It's Python based. You can do all kinds of templatization. You can set up reactors to automatically check for predetermined conditions, and then automatically execute predefined code base.
Does it use artificial intelligence and big data to deliver value-added solutions?
Yes, you totally could do all the buzzword things.
That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, no, seriously, like you really can. If you really wanted to get wonky with it, I've built cyber weapon platforms with it, to where you can set predefined triggers. So, like, say for instance, you could set reactors to monitor your Bro IDS system, and if you detect certain types of packets or certain types of artifacts inside of your traffic flow, you can automatically execute a series of sophisticated predefined actions. Or in essence, you can execute, say for instance, if you detect something like someone's trying to abuse your SMB service, you can automatically run an in-map scan against their service, capture specific exposed ports, and if certain ports are defined, you can execute predefined attacks against that service port. So in essence, you can automatically execute counterattacks with salt reactors. So you can build some really interesting things with it. But yeah, I love it. It's a great platform. I'm actually building a new portal for the Django language to interface with Salt automatically through its APIs with a pre-established project. I'm adopting it, forking it, and then modifying it.
You said, bro. Most people, bro project, and so they still call it
Yeah.
bro, don't they?
Yeah, it's bro. Everybody calls it bro. Like
It's going to be years before
Yeah.
Zeke really.
it'll never be Zeke.
Yeah,
Ever.
even in the source code, it still refers to itself as bro.
Ever. We go out of our way to correct people when they say Zeke. It's bro. Yeah, the amount of financial damage alone that changing it from bro to Zeke has done to the company already, it won't survive if we actually allow for the adoption of the name Zeke.
And it's such a silly whine because the origin of it is Big Brother, as I understand it.
Well, we can.
That is correct.
Can we say Zeke, bro?
Well, the issue is my first thing about it is it's politics.
Yeah.
Bringing politics into just the name itself. And I'm just like, leave politics out of cyber.
But people say that
That's what it's called.
you have to be of a place of privilege to say that you can exclude politics.
Well, I'm a Native American. I have the most privilege, and I say, being a poor Native American with no family, that it's
No.
Trump cards.
Uh-oh.
Are you
He
trans?
has the most privilege. I got the ultimate privilege behind me. Don't make me invoke her.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
I got a female Latina. Don't start.
Unlock.
Disabled.
I see your privilege and raise my privilege. You've activated my ultimate.
I love you all, and I miss you. I can see you guys again.
Good to see you as well.
Good to see you. Actually, I'll show my face for a very short time.
He done unleashed the power.
I'm very blue tonight.
My trap card. Yeah. But no, my thing is this, and it's getting to the topic at hand. It's just there's no place in politics for important things like what we do in cyber. Like with what's going on right now for the CFAA, which is a very big deal. I don't know if you guys are aware of it or not, but I sent out an alert today the second that news dropped. They're reviewing the CFAA due to impacts that it's having to journalists. And so the Supreme Court is supposed to be reviewing that, and they'll release a new ruling update on the CFAA and its powers. And so regardless of what side of the line you stand on for politics or personal beliefs, that is going to have major implications to us as operators, engineers and technicians, as well as architects and developers. So it doesn't matter what you do professionally. If you're involved at any condition or point in cybersecurity, even if it's just developing solutions that can be breached, you're going to be impacted by it.
I'm sorry, which court case are you talking about?
So the Supreme Court, I don't know the case number yet. I don't know if they have an actual docket case for it, but the Supreme Court is reviewing the CFAA because of the implications that it's caused for journalism.
Oh, that case.
Like what interpretation? Like regarding what interpretation of it, though?
I can't speak to it specifics. I just know
that's
the case.
The EFF is the one who's bringing that up, right? Or someone with the EFF?
I don't know. I can't speak to it. I haven't gotten all the information myself yet.
Let's see. I believe I've heard that case a little over a year ago.
Yeah, it's going to be big when they actually do it, because they're going to do it because of what happened with Snowden. Like, it's almost guaranteed that that case is going to make it all the way to the Supreme Court, and there is going to be a ruling.
Thanks a lot, Snowden.
Going over the terms of service thing again.
It's still going to happen, which I'm personally in favor of, especially after SB 315. So I had to give up my truck just to make sure that thing went away, and so I've actually
is on.
for that problem, and yeah, that cost me a contract and a truck to make sure that went away. They were going to criminalize cybersecurity research in the state of Georgia, and so
okay. I see what it is. It's they visited this issue in lower courts once before, so I guess it's been appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court. Now, appellate courts have actually looked at this.
Here we go. The EFF urging the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, to renew the scope of the CFAA by holding that accessing computers in ways that violate terms of services on the website does not violate the law. Currently, that is a contested issue. Things such as ban evading, using a proxy, scraping the website. If they say, we don't want you scraping it. There have been some jurisdictions that's claimed, well, they said they don't authorize it, therefore it must be a felony for you to violate this terms of service.
Well, the Supreme Court's already ruled on that versus LinkedIn, and so
they've ruled on that narrowly.
Yeah.
And so this can be a bit more of a broader request.
Because from what I understand, that they ruled against LinkedIn on that one by stating that because they put it on the internet and it's publicly facing, that there's no privilege of privacy.
Let's see, LinkedIn, CFAA. SCOTUS.
You ruled on that, Bert.
Here we go. Ruling HiQ versus LinkedIn. Did I go up to SCOTUS or not?
Yeah.
No,
Well,
okay, no, it
it
did
went
not.
to
It did
SCOTUS.
not go to SCOTUS. It went
Did
to
it go to SCOTUS? Okay, I was told it went to SCOTUS.
Mine just as of last year, last September, it was ruled on by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
And
Yeah, it was looked at the appellate level, and that's why it's all the way up at Supreme Court now, because it's already been decided at the appellate level.
Okay.
Well,
so they're just
that
bundling
level.
this and other cases together then, and they're gonna make it. Is that what they're doing, Raul? Like,
Say what?
This is really important. I don't know if you guys are familiar with web scraping. I do a ton of web scraping for Intel stuff, and so web scraping policies have always been incredibly vague, and like it's really easy to run afoul of them. And so if they criminalize that behavior, a lot of the OSINT and Intel systems and services that we use in cybersecurity are going to go away.
Okay, so
doesn't mean they'll go away.
Oh, they'll absolutely go away. People, and when it comes to catching felony charges, people run like the wind. Like they won't even go near the potential of catching a charge.
It's interesting because this actually has something to do with a training I was participating in. I'm just going to say in the past 30 days with law enforcement. Yes, this will have an impact, especially when it comes to things like web scraping and things like that. Exceeding authorized access in violation of terms of service can be very broad. Obviously, it can be whatever that terms of service state. However, there's also cases where where the terms of service should cover that. A great example is this was being taught to law enforcement that in some cases to help get a lead on your suspect, is it permissible? They really didn't ask if it was permissible. It was shown and demonstrated that approaching a password reset portal and entering the username, on some systems it will say, is your email, and it'll have a partial email, and then it'll be redacted, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes they'll use that to determine the true identity of a suspect. Now, when you're on the website and it says enter your username to reset your password, and whether it be an FBI or another agent of the state does that, they are exceeding authorized access, and technically they are getting fruits from the forbidden tree, which does make that evidence suppressible. They're actually committing a felony when they do that.
That makes so.
Yeah, but does that really breach the FAA though? That doesn't. You're not actually accessing the system. You're accessing a publicly facing portal at that point.
The definition of exceeds authorized access is constantly in dispute. One of the interpretations by Orrin Kerr, I believe he's a former attorney from the Department of Justice.
Yeah, I know.
Which is exceeding authorization should only apply to authentication gateways or use of programmatic exploits.
Yeah, and that's not accurate at all.
And I mean that's what he's saying it should mean. And some jurisdictions have agreed, some have not.
Not at all, because I can use your API, and if I abuse your API, I don't have to access your systems through authentication. I can just abuse your API with malformed queries and dump your database. I did that on my last.
That would be a programmatic exploit. If you're dumping a database by.
But I'm not doing it programmatically. I can do that injection manually.
Programmatically, that's just quibbling over the definition of programmatically. If you're sending a SQL query, that's you might as well say it's programmatic.
Not really, not at all.
Even though you're not scripting it out.
Yeah, but that's not what programmatic would be, because if you said that was programmatic, I couldn't send you mail. I couldn't do a mail lister on publicly listed information because that would be considered a CFAA breach.
That's not
information is getting programmatically.
Are you gaining access to information that is not otherwise public?
Yeah.
By circumventing an authentication gateway or using a programmatic exploit in order to gain this access. The example you gave was of scraping, I guess, addresses from a website. How in the world would that be an issue or violating that definition?
Because some directories don't show it beyond a manual view of what you can have access to. So, for instance, if I have a system that only allows for pagination of up to 1,000, but if I send a query because the system is misconfigured, and the intention, but not the actual available source code basis, allows for an infinite number of queries, but the data is only going to allow it to display 1,000. I could pull 100,000 from the database, even though it's only supposed to be intended to show 1,000.
From my understanding, as long as you're not causing a denial of service kind of scenario, in that case, the information.
Yeah, but that doesn't meet the requirements in the definition of programmatic, though, and that's the issue. Is a misconfiguration from a developer's push perspective could still cause you as a user to commit a CFAA crime based on the CARE's definition of programmatic.
You are still accessing publicly accessible information. You are just accessing more of it at once than was originally designed. You are not actually accessing information that was not meant to be public.
No, it wasn't meant to be public, remember, because I said that it was only supposed to show 1,000, but if you leverage an API request, it shows more than 1,000, even though the developers never intended to do that due to misconfiguration, which is the #1 cause of security breaches. You are able to get an unlimited number of data sets. But then the issue is how does a user understand the intent of a developer simply through a UI? If they're never using the UI, they'll never receive that intent. So this is where CARE's definition becomes incredibly dangerous, because misconfigurations in code happen all the time.
Yes, and I'm sure that's one of the areas that would be debated about greatly within the courts. By his definition, though, things such as incrementing the UID in a URL to get a different user profile, reference to Weave there, would not be considered a such of a violation.
Yeah, but that would violate TOS.
Probably.
Well, let me rephrase that. It'll violate TOS once you exceed, for like Twitter, it's like 2,500.
Oh, I know. I wasn't referring to.
I'm just giving an example. Yeah, I think theirs is like 2,500 profiles per hour or something, depending on which API key you have.
Oh, I was referring to the whole AT&T fiasco from almost a decade ago.
Okay.
Where Weave, I believe, had some app on his tablet. He did ran Wireshark or something. He saw it says accessing a website with this UID. What happens if I increment the UID by 1? Oh, look, I get someone else's personal information. Yeah. Let me download 10,000 of these and then give all this information to a journalist to, fuck with AT&T.
But the thing about that is, when you look at that, there's actual people just look at the wording of 18 USC 1030, which is the CFAA. They actually define what they constitute that is, and are you entitled to access that information?
Well, that's the issue. Is entitled is a very vague term in terms of what's publicly facing. If you've made something publicly facing and I can see it, so for instance, if you go and you put a poster up in your window, but you didn't put it and you didn't mean for me to see it, but I walk past your house on the side of the sidewalk and I look over at your window and I see your poster and it's you in a naked photo and I take a picture of your poster coming out of your window, according to definitions, I would have potentially violated your rights and taken illicit photos of your body.
And actually, in some jurisdictions, that is a crime to use any sort of device that enhances vision, such as a telescope, binoculars, things like that, to view something that you can see from the street, but using something to aid your vision to look inside someone's house and to take recorded depictions of that. Yes, it's called voyeurism. It is a felony in some jurisdictions.
But that's not what the example he gave. He gave an example of someone putting a poster.
Yeah, see, that's a poster that you can see from the street already visualized. You're not zooming into their house and looking further in. It's something you can see clearly from the street by simply just looking up and taking a picture and then just walking by. But that's the issue, is if something's publicly facing, one, there's a bigger issue there already, because data that was never intended to be publicly facing is publicly facing. And so that's where a bug bounty program should come into play. And that's why I'm a major advocate for effectively Samaritan law immunities, or Samaritan law-like immunities, for people that actively pursue bug bounties. And that's because we find stuff all the time, like with what happened with Sony about, I think it was 6 months to a year ago, with the major SMB malware for ransomware. I discovered that 6 months prior to that when I hacked half of Japan, because they didn't put a scope on their bug bounty program for IP space. So I hit every single thing inside of their IP space, and I ended up hitting a shit ton of their customers by accident. And a lot of them had QNAP NASs that I ended up breaking into because of SMB issues. And so I turned that in as part of the bug bounty program, and they dismissed it. And then 6 months later, they were in the news because of a major breach, because they all ended up getting hit by somebody else with ransomware. But these are the issues that I talk about on a regular basis, that these are things that normally would be looked at as potentially criminal, but because of other innocent issues, like the ISP had a legitimate program, but they failed to do something like a confinement of some kind, whether it's a configuration or an assignment of specific data set, like an ISP IP space allocation or allotment. That's the effectively the ROA, the ROE for the rules of engagement. Because things like that aren't there, or a developer makes a mistake on the API where one part of the API is secured, which I've seen in one of the pen tests I've done, but then another segment of it's completely exposed where you can ask it anything and it'll give you the data because of a misconfiguration, because someone forgot to add like one simple if statement to check for authentication and to check for user permissions. Like that stuff happens all the time, and it's very innocent mistakes. But based on certain things like CARE's definition, I would have gone to jail for 35,000 counts of felony CFAA violations. Like, but these are the issues that we face as bug bounty, I guess, participants. Like, it's a double-edged sword these days. That's why a lot of people don't want to participate, because combined with the fact that the value is almost nothing. Like, I just saw like an XSS, and then another one was XSS, one was a browser RCE, go for like $25,000, and I'm like, you only got paid $25K for something that gives you pretty much unlimited freedom on someone's box. But when you start looking at monetary value versus time investment versus risk, it's not worth it to anybody, and that's why you start to see a lot of participation drop off in bug bounties across the board.
Well, I mean, there's also a great deal of uncertainty regarding, what is or is not okay to do, what is or is not safe to do. To lawyers who have never touched a computer before, it's the simplest question in the world to answer. People who have touched a computer before, it's, if you are coming out of school and didn't have a class teach you specifically what exactly you should or should not do, there's a lot of uncertainty there because a lot of the stuff's not really intuitive.
I remember I had a professor once talking about the CFAA. They thought that they were doing something. There was a paper they were involved with basically on securing Wi-Fi, and a lot of the advice on it was just silly and useless, fairly useless, MAC address filtering and so forth. But one of the things they said was that they could legally have driven around and tested for default passwords. And I'm serious. No. I'm pretty damn sure that would still break the CFAA.
Yeah, it would, because you're still guessing at the admin credential.
I tried to express that, they're like, yeah. I'd love to argue with you about this. Then again, the same person was more interested in social issues and missed more class than any of the students.
Yeah, and that's why, like I said before, like I've seen a lot of stuff that's pushed out there that I've seen other people in the community do, where they're like doing baby monitor products, for instance. You know who she was. Where she started checking around the internet to see what products were available that you could just log into with default credentials. Technically, every single camera that she broke into was a CFAA account. And all that person has to do is file a complaint, a criminal complaint, and she could potentially go to jail. Because technically, she used a credential that she was never given to access an internet accessible device that she was not the owner of, and then successfully logged into it with that credential. Even if the credential is published and known, you still don't have authorization to access it if you don't own it. And you can't grant yourself access to a device simply because you can see it on the internet. A device is not like a trash can or a lunchbox you find on the ground. But I mean, if you really wanted to talk about it like an object, a mundane object in life, yeah, if you found someone's wallet laying on the ground, picking up that wallet, yes, you can pick up the wallet and return it to a police station without any issues. But the second you open that wallet and remove contents from it, you've committed theft, because you took an object that you found that wasn't yours, you rummaged through that object, and you removed items from it that were not your possessions. That's petty theft.
From a computer perspective, though, you're not stealing anything at all, period. It's at worst, it's copying, which I know if you're talking about intellectual property, you have conflation of copying and theft being the same thing.
Well, in many cases, if nothing else, you're destroying. And so a lot of people...
Rarely.
Very absolutely. No, all the time. Because you have to remember, every single time you access the system, a lot of those devices have limited storage space. And so by simply accessing the device and logging into it, you typically generate a login log. And so the log that was there previously on the FIFO system has been destroyed to make room for your new log. And so you have caused damage to that system because there was a log that was there before that no longer is, that's no longer there because specifically you took an action, accessed the device without permission, which violates the CFAA because you had no authorization.
That scenario would only happen if the system was A, already full on logs before the login happened, and B, was set up to delete prior logs in order to write new ones.
Yeah, which most logging systems and services are. They're FIFO.
No, that's an extremely uncommon default.
No, it's not. It's incredibly common. Every Linux box ships like that.
No.
FIFO boxes. Yeah.
No, they don't. A lot of Linux boxes do not delete old logs by default in order to create new ones.
Let me pull it up for you on Ubuntu. Give me a second.
Actually, Liz, you are wrong. Most of them do. They rotate off.
Somebody who's going to do that.
That's log rotate. So if your system is completely full, all partitions are full, you're not for any Linux systems by default are not going to go ahead and delete the old logs in order to write new ones.
Yes, well, by default they do. I think that I believe the default, it depends on your distribution.
Yeah, syslog, it's FIFO.
But it's either 1 week for full rotations, or I mean, I think that's the default, but you can obviously make it more restrictive.
Yeah,
that's over a period of time. That's not over. That's after a period of time. That's not like if you have it set to every day for 5 days, rotate logs. After the 5th day, delete a log. That's not the same thing as if your system is full, and in order to ensure you always get the most recent logs, you delete the oldest stuff first in order to make room immediately. Linux systems do not do the latter.
Yeah, but think about it from this perspective as well, even excluding the logs entirely. What about poorly programmed devices that when you access systems, which a lot of them ship these days now with, whereas once you access the system initially the first time, it then requires you to change the password because it's already changed the previously set password, and you have to now set a new password. What happens if you access that device and that system doesn't recognize that that old password's been changed, and then it blows away that old hash, and it has nothing set? And then that device doesn't actually change the password or set it to something else, and it simply just drops the session. Well, now that user's been denied access to their own system. So you've actually caused further harm from obstruction. You've actually locked them out of their own device.
I would be much more concerned about for default passwords. If you log in, it asks you, "Hey, you've not used this before. Change your password." And that person puts in a new password. I'm more concerned about that because that would also likely be prevent the consumer or the victim from being able to log in.
Well, I don't want to call them victims because that perpetrates that every time every security person's accessing something, they're automatically doing harm. So I would prefer the system's owner. Yeah, the system's owner. Yeah.
That would prevent the system's owner from being able to log in with the default password, but I'd also argue that if they hadn't logged in beforehand with the default password, that it's not like they're going to do in the future.
Yeah, and I apologize in advance for cutting you off there, but we've already got a big enough stereotype where we got hoodies and little glasses like sitting in the dark. Like I don't want to start adding words like victim out there.
I've already been
a little deeper.
Like 5 years ago, I was at an event in DC where I had members from the White House, various people from the military, also some people from commercial private sector. And one of the topics that came up was, there's not a lot of people coming into cybersecurity these days, especially women. And, we're starting to think that whole, mystique about a person wearing a hoodie as like all in the dark background in a dark basement, maybe scaring away women. We should change that.
I heard something similar stupid said because apparently InfoSec uses too many military terms.
I am a fan of, I actually do think there's too many military and intelligence terms. Mostly military as, no offense to the military people here, but I do feel military terminology in InfoSec tends to turn very innocuous acts into a catastrophe. It
Oh,
seems
you mean
to be
over dramatization? Let's just call it what it is.
I was looking for like catastrophize.
Yeah, we have an industry full of queens, whether they're women or not. They're
So
queens.
yeah. So I mean, like, no offense to military people.
Everything's a disaster.
I actually do think there's too much military terminology when it tries to frame, a kid changing like a text on a news website as a fucking war.
Hey, you can't say that. It's classified.
99 shell. All right, cyber war started.
Yeah.
I was in a meeting today, and this guy kept calling me. He said, "You're the cyber guy, right?" I'm like, no.
ASL, Charles, ASL.
Put on my Robin Wizard hat.
I am not the. I am not the cyber guy. I'm just Charles. That's how I had to say it in the meeting. He said, "Yeah, cyber guy over here." I'm like, I'm just Charles. Like, oh my god.
Yeah, I can look like Charles. Title Charles.
Oh, by the way, not to take things back to an earlier subject. Did anybody else have anything to say on the investment subject matter?
Oh,
yeah.
Investment wise, for me, like I'm dabbling a little bit in the stock market. I'm not a heavy player, probably like a lot of folks are, but just trying it out a little bit, get my beak wet a little bit and see what happens. But I don't know.
So I
do a lot in the stock market.
Yeah, it is very likely that there's probably going to be a massive correction event in the stock market because
that's going to be in September, October, in case anyone's wondering.
That's my guess as well, though I really wouldn't. I really am hesitant to pin a specific time frame, though.
It'll be September, October.
That's the guess.
I'll tell you why later.
That's the fear of the second wave of the coronavirus dramatically increasing the number of cases.
So
when it gets colder.
Hold on, I got questions. So the wave hits. You say September, October. Just saying.
It's not even going to be a wave. So to go ahead and clarify on that, what it is if you look at the mortgages that are outstanding, right now we're at an all-time high on mortgage defaults. The average state has a 40% renter default on their lease, and then mortgage will be reflective of that as well. So
that's a different but very relevant issue. Yes.
Yeah, but the issue, no, it's the same problem because if you look at like places like Bigger Pockets where a lot of the landlords go, what they're doing is the dumbest thing possible, and I openly advocate against this, which is what they're doing to build their first portfolios instead of buying their first houses in cash and building within reason and within a level of DTI tolerance. They're leveraging to extremes in order to get their first properties. And the problem is even if they have great tenants, the tenants can still lose their jobs. And the issue is that the tenants are frozen in place and cannot be evicted due to recent policies from regulators from multiple states. And so it's impossible to evict them. And so the policies, they do have deadlines that just got extended till I do believe September/October. But the issue is the limitations do not stop you from being evicted because of defaults on your mortgage. They only stop you from being evicted specifically if it's your primary residence and you are a tenant. And the issue with that is that for the ones that do have the mortgages, those mortgages, they only apply to the mortgages that are specifically for people that have federal loans, and those are frozen. But that's still got 10% out there that haven't had any protections of any kind. Now,
I don't believe it doesn't cover renters either. It only covers people with them.
No. The renters are protected, but the issue is with the mortgages are only protected FHA, VA, USDA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Sallie Mae. Now the problem with those is that those aren't the loans that most of these landlords that are buying these properties with are using, because part of the requirement for those is that you have to occupy that place for 2 years. And so what they're doing is getting commercial loans to buy these properties, and those are not protected. And so all these landlords are carrying all of these costs and burdens and losses on top of already having these tenants who haven't paid their mortgage. And so the issue is when that freeze finally ends, which it will, that loan, that cost is not forgiven. that money is still owed to the landlord. And the issue is right now we've been having that for 6 to 8 months now. Depending on whatever time frame you want to use, it doesn't matter. Because even if your rent is only $700 a month, that's a $4,200 expense, which exceeds the average American's inability to pay a $400 bill by over 10 times. So there's no way in hell they're going to be able to afford a $4,200 bill, much less places like California where it's $2,000 to $3,000 a month for rent. So they're looking at $18,000, $19,000, $20,000 in unpaid rent that's due and payable immediately. And if they don't, they're immediately evictable. And the issue with that is that the landlords aren't paying their notes, and the banks are having to carry those notes for the FHA, VA, the government loans to save time. And the problem with that is that those bonds that underlie those surety bonds that are tied to those mortgage bonds that are actually guaranteed. The surety bonds are guaranteed by the government, and those mortgage bonds, which is what they are sold in packets. They're effectively broken up into pieces. So if there's a $400,000 loan, they're $10,000 bonds a piece. They'll sell 40 bonds in order to cover the full mortgage or whatever the math is. And then investors will buy up however many bonds at.
Can you just go ahead and say there's going to be another mortgage-backed security issue?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's going to be. But it's going to be a lot worse. Because the issue is that you look at the current lending practices, the easement on the current reserve requirements that was typically 5% has been reduced, I do believe, to 1% at this point, or none.
I think I may be the only one here who actually understands a lot of the terms you're using.
Yeah, but in essence, what it says is like, say, for instance, if you're a bank, for those that don't understand, if you're a bank, the government says that you can lend out money, but you can only lend out X number of percentage basis, and you have to keep a reserve. And so we'll let you lend out, and we'll let you do loans up to 20 times for the 5% reserve, the actual amount of money you have on hand at any given time. And that's the typical reserve. So if you have $100, you can take $5 and you can hold on to that, and then you can multiply 95 times 20. And that's how much money you can lend out. Yeah, and then that goes and that scales to however many zeros that you add to that balance. And the problem with that is,
you go ahead, you finish.
Yeah, and the problem with that is that what happens if people default on the loan? The bank still has to pay those notes because the bank is still on the hook, and so they'll go to the government and say, "Hey, your mortgage defaulted, and so we need you to pick up this note," and the bank will then have the government pay them back for that loan that they guaranteed. And so minus any reserves or quotas or whatever stipulations they may have with that bank. But in most cases, the government reimburses them for the entirety of the loan that they guaranteed, minus any of the requirements that they have stipulated with the loan that you had to pay as a person, which for the current mortgages, for everything except for the veterans mortgages, for the VA, is 3%. So minus the 3% down, which they make you pay. And so the issue with that is that the mortgages, that 5% has been shifted down to 1%. So now they're excessively over leveraged. And then once those mortgages default, they're going to be excessively over defaulted. And so they're, in essence, their write downs is what it's called, will be excessive losses. And right now you've got banks setting record level quarterly losses in the tens of billions per quarter, which is catastrophic levels of losses.
Well, until we get to look, as long as derivatives aren't touched, we should be fine. And I'm saying that a bit facetiously because derivatives are going to be the end of the thing.
A train wreck, yeah. They're at like 700-800% spikes, yeah.
Well, so trying to use a bit more English language for anyone listening who hasn't, zoned out. Reserve requirement for a bank essentially means, let's say it's a 5% reserve requirement. They have to keep 5% of cash on hand. If people want to withdraw money from the bank, they take that money from the money the bank has on hand. If too many people if there's like a loss of faith in the banking system and too many people want to throw money at once, more than 5% of the bank's holdings,
bank runs.
Then, the bank can't necessarily, normally the bank would not be able to pay back the people who want to withdraw the money later, even though You say, it's my money, it's in the bank. They can't give you the money back because the bank doesn't have your money to give you back.
Yeah, and that's where a bank run default comes in.
Yeah, typically, for small cases or isolated cases, that money's insured by the feds. And the feds will pay the bank, who will then pay you. But since this is nationwide, if the feds are paying back nearly every bank for all these defaults, you can expect a repeat of the 2008 crash.
Yeah.
But we are in worse conditions in 2008, considering the whole pandemic.
Yeah, and one of the things to keep in mind to add to what he just said, the FDIC current reserves is at 3% of their guarantee. And so if, say, for instance, the government says that we'll guarantee $1 trillion of all the money that's existing out in all the banks, well, what that really means is they only have $30 billion on hand. That's all they've got. And so if there's an actual bank run on all the banks in the U.S., the FDIC can't actually meet its obligation of guarantees. And
well, the real question,
the FDIC will also default.
Look, we all know that, yes, it will default, but, I have complete faith that our lawmakers will print as much money as needed to meet the demand.
Money printer go brrr.
Yes. Which I know we've gotten into serious financial nerdery here, but essentially it means a good chance of another 2008 happening, plus a very good chance of massive inflation happening because of all the money being injected into the economy. That might happen. That may cause a stagflation event, which is economy goes to shit and everything costs a lot more.
Yeah.
And that is the worst of all scenarios. And I sincerely pray we'd never hit that, because that would mean
maybe I should just invest in guns and ammo instead.
I do not believe we are going to be hitting a Mad Max environment.
Damn it. Now, there's a good investment scheme. I don't know if you remember this, Irongeek, but me and you had a plan once. There was a gun buyback program, and they were paying like a decent amount for handguns. And me and you came up with this idea to buy a bunch of really cheap handguns because we could have paying them cheaper than they were paying, and we were going to get a semi. And we were just going to fill it full of these handguns and take it over there.
High Point.
I believe they were even cheaper than High Points. I mean, if they want a pistol, it could be a single shot. It doesn't matter. If you're
there's this little single shot you can get now. I remember seeing it on Demolition Ranch. That might be a possibility.
Yeah.
All right. Any other investment?
Gun buyback.
So,
next couple of months.
Trying to talk about more layperson's investing advice. Because I know we went into serious finance nerdery there.
Yeah.
Layperson's investing advice. Your loans, before you even think about putting money in the stock market, focus things like credit card debt. First and foremost, even above and beyond your emergency fund, credit card debt is even more important to pay off. So credit card debt, first and foremost, and any other debt that has like that kind of an interest rate.
How about student loans? What are student loans at?
Student loans is between 6 and 8% typically for federal, and then it gets worse for.
Private is. I've spent years trying to help a friend who had a fucking private loan that was a variable rate starting at 11%. That was a. That was the bulk of her loan. What
did they major in?
She did not. She unfortunately got scammed into a for-profit art school, which eventually got shut down because it was violating many, many, many laws. But she was still on the hook for $130,000 of loan for her art degree. And so she didn't actually graduate with a degree, and she had this massive loans. And she was
recommend another book.
Somehow, she's been paying it for many years. She was a good enough artist to actually be able to make enough from Patreon to pay this stuff. Apparently, and I was actually surprised to find this out, because she had paid off her loans for enough years, and her credit score got good enough, despite not having a degree and despite having a job that had a very inconsistent income, her credit score got up to reach a threshold where she was able to refinance her private loan, variable rate private loan, into a static rate private loan. So she went from her $100,000 loan having 11% APR.
Wait, hang on. Just sorry to interrupt, but just to quickly clarify here, they had an ARM college loan.
Yes.
Oh my god.
It was a private loan. Yes.
Oh my god.
It was awful. Yeah.
Whoa.
It was. Yeah. It was really awful. And
That's so bad.
And she unfortunately was so scared to touch that loan much, so she paid the minimum on that and was trying to prepay all of her, the federal loans at like a 5% interest. And I'm like saying, no,
Such a mistake.
You can the federal loans.
Dead snowball.
So she's essentially had over a decade of her life just
vaporized,
blazing away, just trying to keep her head above water.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, apparently just being able to keep paying long enough that got her credit score high enough where she could refinance something less fucking insane. Which was around 6.5% for the whole lot, which I'm sure that's just fucking amazing. That probably shaved off like $800 a month of her repayment from interest alone. Also, fuck Sally Mae. They can go rot in hell. Sally Mae were the fucking scam artists were trying to convince her, hey, earlier on before her credit score got high enough, hey, we can't tell you this in email, but please call us. We'll tell you over the phone what your options are, where there's no paper trail for you to report us from. And then over the phone, they were telling her, we can't help you with refinancing, but we can let you, what? You should reconsolidate your 5% interest loans also into 10% variable interest loans.
Yeah. Just so everybody's aware, though, the reason why Sally Mae is called Sally Mae is because they used to be called Navient. And then Navient had a huge falling out with the government, and then they rebranded as Sally Mae. Just so everybody knows.
Well, actually, they still call themselves Navient as well in private.
Yeah, but most people know them as Sally Mae. And so they're a train wreck. Never do your loans through Sally Mae. Go to Nelnet. Nelnet is a much better lender.
So I've been having to call Sally Mae, call Navient constantly, trying to figure out, in all the specific ways for trying to screw over my not finance heavy friend. Tell her like, okay, here's what you do to make sure your prepayments are not going to next month's interest. Because by default, they also want to make sure, they also are saying, they also assume if you're paying extra on a given month that you don't want to pay down your principal. You want to pay down next month's interest. Which is just, fuck Sally Mae.
Yeah. They are pretty bad. But yeah.
I know we keep going. I know we keep going off the topic of what people should be doing presently, and we had our own individual finance rants.
Hey, it happens.
Pay off your credit card stuff. Do not put a bunch of money in the stock market that you anticipate needing within the next 3-4 years. If you want to put your money somewhere it's still going to be there. But you don't want to just leave it in your checking account. Certificate of deposits are safe as long as, although if you leave it in there for less than a year, you're not going to really get much of any interest. If you are trying to save less than $10,000, I-bonds or inflation index bonds are sold by the feds, and they keep track of inflation and are a great place to park money.
I would disagree with that.
They're not the most liquid, but they are also guaranteed to not go into negative.
Yeah.
So
I'd recommend Vanguard Fallen Angels, if anybody.
So again, that was specifically if you want money that has no reasonable chance of actually losing principal.
Yeah. Again, like the issue with Treasury, and the reason why I don't do Treasury at all, never have, is their value base is terrible. Their value base is absolutely terrible, and their liquidity is getting worse every single year.
Okay. If the feds are unable to pay back, If the feds are unable to pay back the bonds, there's not going to be an economy left for you to operate in.
Not at all. I mean, look at it from California's perspective. If the federal government defaults on their bonds, then all that's going to happen is all federal assets, which there are very little federal assets, mind you, that are backed as the guarantees will be seized. So public lands, things that we're not actually living on or using, some types of natural resources that have been used to guarantee these bonds.
And what do you think's going to happen when all that's sold off?
Well, they're going to be liquidated, but the issue is the federal government owes that debt, not the U.S., and then they'll end up defaulting on the debt, and then it'll end up doing massive damage to the credit rating. Moody's will downrate us, and then we'll never be able to sell debt again, and it is very likely the U.S. will no longer be the world reserve currency. But that's going to happen regardless.
To put that in layman's terms, interest rate goes up and will never go back down to what it is now.
Yeah.
Never again.
The U.S.
Everyone's interest rate will go up.
Yeah, the U.S. enjoys incredibly low interest rates in terms of borrowing. 2 to 5% is incredibly generous. Most other countries, like for instance in Mexico, I was looking to do mortgage lending in Mexico. Their average mortgage rate's 15 to 20+%. Their mortgage rates are incredibly high.
It's actually been even more generous. Like some years back, it was at nearly 0%, or for a brief period of time, it was negative. People were paying us money to hold their money.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about negative. I know that we've gone to 0 recently.
Briefly, it was negative, but we're not in Japan's levels. Yeah. Japan has had an issue for a while now where negative interest rates on their bonds.
Well, the issue with Japan is they've reached an incredibly high level of debt, which historically they've never had. Which started sometime around Obama era, where he made a speech to global leaders about leverage, and then they bought into that, which was a terrible idea, because historically for thousands of years Japan has been a savings-based economy, and only very, very, very recently has their actual performance shifted from a historically savings-based economy to a debt-based economy, and they've already reached last I checked, 120, 180% GDP. Which is really bad for those who don't know. 80%. Anything that's 100+ GDP is terrible.
So it's the amount of debt they have is more money than their economy produces in a given year, and they're saying if every single penny of the economy went to paying off their debt, they would not be able to pay it off in a year. Now that said, what's probably been more of a concern is how much their interest rate is they have to pay back. And thankfully for Japan, their interest rates are incredibly low. So the rate at which their interest rates snowball up is not high. That's not always going to be guaranteed. Anyways, we keep going down these weird financial rabbit holes.
Okay, so basic things we'll give people advice for: pay off your debts because they're usually at a higher interest rate than anything you could invest.
I know you're not.
Number one, your debt, especially credit card debt. Number two, save up for emergency savings. I don't care if you think your job is safe. Save up minimum 6 months' money, liquid in your bank, so that you can live off of it. Utilities, rent, food, transportation. 6 months living expenses in your bank liquid. Only after you meet those two requirements do you then look at the market. Especially in this kind of environment. And as for the market, if you are not planning on withdrawing the money anytime soon, like if you're looking at a 401k and the like, then I would still probably safe to just keep your money in there. Do not withdraw your money. Do not do what so many people did in 2008, which was sell all their investments when everything was going to shit. No matter how bad things are nowadays, the economy will eventually recover. So your money's going to be in there long enough, it will eventually get back up there. But it will only get back up there if you do not sell it.
Realize unrealized loss.
Yeah, so like even if people are panicking, and I fully expect there will be a a period of time where there will be a lot of panicking in the news, on social media. Do not sell your investments, especially at that point.
I don't know if I'd agree with that. I mean, I've liquidated my portfolio here recently to wipe out the last of my debts. I think it really varies on a person-to-person basis.
I'm saying right now is probably, if you're going to sell it right now, the economy's not down too much. I'm saying that
I liquidated mine before the collapse happened. I saw the collapse happening, and I told all my people to get out. And
I'm saying
peak right before collapse.
I'm saying in the event of a collapse or a massive economic downturn, do not sell your money during that downturn unless that is literally you have no other option. You are going to be homeless.
Well, I wouldn't say that either. Ultimately, what the issue comes down to from perspective is performance. It's what's your return rate, your realized return rate, your triple R. That's all that matters. Because if, say, for instance, you have a mortgage and your mortgage is 5%, and your realized return rate is 3%, your money would best serve you liquidating that portfolio, taking that money and wiping out that debt. Because a 4%, 3% versus a 5%, you're losing substantially more money paying interest than you would be by eliminating that.
I'm assuming that there's not many people listening that own multiple properties.
Well, it's not even about properties. It's even if it's just your primary residence. If your mortgage is, I've seen mortgages as high as 8% for people with bad credit in the U.S. specifically. I want to specify there with federal loans. Like the interest rates can get high. And the issue is that if, especially with portfolios, if the major hedge funds are to be assumed as correct, which statistically most brokers never beat the market, over 90% never beat the market. So keep that in mind when you're talking to a broker in the first place. If they're not beating market, then they're not worth their salt. And so keep that in mind when you're looking at their portfolios historically to see whether or not they're worth investing in. And the average market rate, like I said, is somewhere, depending on which time frame, anywhere between 7 and 8.6% over an incredibly long period of time. And then for short periods of times, it's been as high as 20+%, depending on which time frames you look at. And it's been as low as negative 30+%, depending on which time frames you look at. And so what you really want is something that's recent, the past 10 to 15 years.
So, I mean, that's in general, yes. I'm just referring more to like 2008, 2007, when everyone's panicking, the economy's going to end, America's doomed, and people were selling their investments left and right when the market was rock bottom. I am saying don't be a lemming in that kind of case. Obviously, there may be very specific circumstances where, selling your investment may be an okay idea during that circumstance, but that's going to be the exception.
Well, I wouldn't agree with that either. It's the issue is people don't know where the market's going, and that's the bigger issue right now. Is a lot of the hedge fund managers all agree on one thing: things are going to get a whole lot worse before they get any better. Specifically because the market has been heavily manipulated, which means the natural direction is down. But because of astronomical amounts of interference directly from the Fed, the market has stopped going down and has done an almost immediate V. And so the issue with that V, which you can clearly see in my portfolio, I gave my past 5-year performance in that IMGR link. But the issue is with that V is an inorganic V. So that V is not naturally occurring. And the problem is that when you manipulate a market, the overcorrection that will come from that manipulation will be further exacerbated by the previous issue that was previously occurring, which was the market collapse to begin with. And so when other items snowball on top of that, that overcorrection will be devastating. And that's what the hedge fund managers are currently talking about now, and why places like Goldman is talking about how the dollar is very likely in its current condition to inevitably be replaced as a world currency. And if and when that happens, which in the current condition and the current trend, it will happen, then there's going to be absolutely devastating effects to the market, because the market is based on confidence, which is why we have the largest market in the world. We have the most amount of capital because everybody comes here to store their money as a store of wealth. And the issue is if people lose their confidence in our dollar, they will subsequently also lose their confidence in our markets. And markets are driven by confidence, not by actual performance, which was reflected in Tesla here recently when I said get out of Tesla when it got to 1700, and less than 3 days later it dropped over $200 almost instantly.
Absolutely nothing you have said actually refutes my main point that if the market is going to shit, don't follow along and also sell your stuff when the market's still low. That's what I was getting after there.
Well, at some point you have to cut your losses. You can't ride the roller coaster forever, especially if you have a retirement account. And the issue is like when the 09 bubble, like right before it burst, there was a downtrend, and people had the ability to get out before it blew up, and they rode it all the way to the bottom. The issue is if you look at Japan's economy, people have this mindset that the money printer go burr, market always go up, stocks always on the rise, and the issue is that it's not actually that way. If you look at other markets around the world that have experienced real economic depressions or real economic consequences, those markets never recovered. And so you look at Japan, it doesn't break a certain point. You look at the EU, they don't break certain points. They don't go over certain points. They never return back to their historical highs. And the issue is we're at a 10+ year bull run on our current market performance. And we auto-corrected on a major correction with artificial manipulation to our markets to maintain that 10-year bull run. And the problem is that at some point there has to be a bear market. Statistically, if you look at a 200+ year time span, there's always been a correction as a bear cycle. There has to be a bear cycle.
Yes, but I'm saying, like, if you, and that's like my entire point was premised on you do not immediately need the money. If your horizon is like 20 years, 30 years, like a lot of people have investment accounts, do not sell your investments. If you're really concerned right now and look at your investment mix, if you're heavy in stocks, start moving some into really conservative bond funds. Yes, even even though the interest rates are so low, I would still be more confident in a very conservative bond fund, or just bond specifically, federal bond specifically, than I would be in the broader market.
Well, I wouldn't recommend bonds. I've seen a lot of poor performance from bonds, unless it's like the Vanguard Fallen Angels. What I would recommend is something like blue chips or nobles, or champions or dividend kings or aristocrats, stocks that have a historical performance of outperforming and surviving and thriving in a market depression. Like I said before, like my market performance is like 347% over 5 years, and so that puts me at like a 60+% market return rate per year. And that's because I'm diversified into healthy stocks and healthy companies. And the companies that I buy into are designed by nature of what they do to be highly resistant historically, and by service trend or product trend to be resistant to depressions and recessions. And they're
resistant until they're not. Take a look at Lehman Brothers.
Yeah, but I didn't invest in Lehman Brothers. It's insurance. It's a terrible investment.
You. Well, I mean, that's you, but I'm just saying, just because it's blue chip doesn't mean
it's going to survive. And that's where diversification, and to your point, that's where diversification comes in. And diversification I do advocate for openly. I'm actually heavily diversified between at least 60 stocks.
Because a lot of people listening may not, if anyone's still listening, after all this finance nerdery, the word diversify or diversification here is not how the cast normally uses it. It's also used in the finance world to mean you have a mix of different kinds of investments. You have in some investments in stocks or multiple stocks, or stocks and bonds, or stocks, bonds, and housing properties, or other kind of investments. That is what diversify means.
Asset classes is the easiest way to say it. Yeah, you diversify across asset classes, or you can just diversify across stock, which diversify you across region and also across asset classes, which is what I do. The stocks and the effectively the companies that I invest in are automatically diversified across asset classes based on what they do. Like one of my holdings is realty, Realty is ticker O, and it's a real estate company that's diversified across regions, multiple regions and countries. And they specialize in assets, the asset class of real estate. And then one of my stock holdings for indexes is VOO. It's invested across the top 500. And then I've got other holdings that are specific stock picks, like companies that I know that aren't going anywhere, like Microsoft. Microsoft's not going anywhere for a long time. And then there's just you invest based on what you know and what you understand. And then for me, I also invest based on dividends. And so I'm a very heavy dividend investor and an income focused investor. I will invest in, and I have a portfolio dedicated specifically for capitalization and capital gains, but I'm not interested in capital gains, but it's just a diversification requirement to protect myself. But I'm very heavy into dividend investing, and my portfolio pays about 300 plus times a year across my portfolio holdings. But I enjoy that continual revenue from the companies that are constantly paying me. So my income is extremely diversified. So even if one of my stocks do take a hit and take a reduction, which then has a dividend cut based on that, which will inevitably come, having one of those or even 10 of those reduce is not going to significantly impact my incomes external to my other incomes and sources of income. And that's why part of the reason why I'll be able to retire here at 30. Preferably by 32 is my ultimate goal. But
I didn't realize you were that young.
I feel like your investing strategy is not something that anyone else here, except maybe Adrian or me, or listen, would be able to actually practice, considering the notable capital requirements it needs.
Well, you could totally do it. It's just you have to have the discipline and the financial management. But I've seen people with substantially less capital than what I make every month do exactly the same thing. It's just the biggest issue that I find, and that's the first thing that I teach people that come into my group, which I teach them for free, is the first thing I teach them is to manage their money. The first thing I teach them is budgeting. And then after budgeting, then I teach them budget planning. And then after budget planning, then I teach them asset management and net worth management. And then I break into where their actual spending is through their OPEX, their personal OPEX or POP. And then on their POP, I help them to identify all of their spending categories and then where they're at versus where they should be to actually be living within their means. And categorically, that's where most Americans make their largest mistake. Is if you have the ability to afford a mortgage, you go for the biggest house you can buy instead of radically reducing what you can get. So just because the bank approves you at 43% DTI does not mean you should take 43%. You should take substantially less and actually buy a house that you can truly afford, pay that house off, and now that 25% of income monthly is now freed up to spend elsewhere.
The TLDR, don't live within your means, live below your means.
Exactly. And that's one of the number one secrets to successful millionaires is that we live within our means. We live beneath our means. And then because we do that, I don't have any bills left. I've got 2 bills left, I think. Credit cards and my last car. And then that's like 52 and I can pay that off pretty much in a month.
I got credit cards which I pay off every month.
Say again?
I got credit cards, which I pay off every month. I mean,
yeah, but do you have other debt outside of that?
House is paid for, cars paid for. That's also a point there are a lot of people who keep up appearances. Like you have millionaires out there driving shitty cars.
Yeah.
They work. And you have people who spend beyond their means or driving a very nice car, but they're putting nothing into savings or retirement.
Yeah, like for the longest time, I was driving like a $6,000 Ford F-150 that was like an 01. And then before that, I was driving a Chevy Tracker that was like an 01.
I got a 2007 Honda Fit that I bought new, which granted, Aaron would say that's not a good idea. I just didn't want to have any more problems because I had a Dodge Neon before that, and that one always caused me so many mechanical problems. My Honda Fit has caused me very few problems other than flat tires and batteries. And I've been driving it since 2007. And I'll probably buy another new Fit eventually once this thing hits 200,000 miles and be good with it. Let's go ahead and wrap this financial stuff up in the next couple of minutes, and we'll go on to the last few subjects.
Sure. But Yeah, they kind of closed the book on this, but yeah, the biggest issue is people just live well beyond their means, and because of that, they end up collapsing underneath their own weight. And so, if people were actually to manage their money appropriately, which is what I teach in my groups, then people are able to actually financially be successful. And so, getting to that point where you eliminate your bills, to where your primary income is actually free to be leveraged for investments, even if it's fractional investments, over a period of time, those investments in number and in both quality and quantity will grow, and you'll inevitably build enough income streams to where you'll free yourself. Which, in order to reach millionaire status and ultimately financial freedom, you're expected to have between 7 and 23 different sources of income in order to fully insulate and isolate yourself. And it's recommended that no income source represents more than 5% of your total income. And by doing that, if you lose one of those, you're not devastated financially, which is where most Americans find themselves, where if you lose your job, you've lost all sources of income and you're crippled financially. Your safety net is, like we were talking about at the very beginning, is wiped out. You have to end up tapping your 401k like everybody is right now because the government's good graces. It's tax-free and penalty-free. Typically, it's not. And then your nest egg gets blown up, your retirement gets blown up, you end up having to reverse mortgage your house by doing a HELOC, you end up going substantially greater into debt, and then you have to dig yourself out of that hole, and then by the time you do, there's another hole that shows up, and then you start all over. And that's the debt cycle that keeps people poor or keeps people living paycheck to paycheck.
Well,
and that's the cycle you have to break.
This is an awfully unusual time. Using today's example, but extrapolating that to here is the generalized issue people have, debt cycle, that seems to be a little weird.
Yeah, like even in current times, like the practice, like to be transparent, my income has increased 1,500% in the past 90 days, and that's because I practiced safe and steady financial practices that allowed me to build up substantial sums of capital. And then I kept myself debt free or an incredibly low DTI that allowed me to execute when prime opportunities presented themselves, like currently where businesses all around me are collapsing. And so, in order to protect myself and for future success, I've been acquiring companies. Currently, I've got 8 businesses that I'm about to close on. And that each one of those is its own separate income stream that produces some moderate income relative to what they normally would produce. And the owners have to sell because they're being crushed under their own businesses. And so I'm
you're buying failing businesses.
Well, they're not failing; they're struggling. And so, in order to protect the employees, I'm stepping in and taking over the companies, and I'm helping the owners exit their current situations. And so I'm typically converting the owners back into employees, and I'm protecting the other employees at the same time.
So,
and that's because if they sustain their losses for a continued perspective of time, they will not survive. But I can weather the storm because I prepared myself financially to do so.
So, I mean, you're talking about having 35 sources of income, just an effort to diversify in case, some doesn't work. But
yeah.
When the threat scenario here is the entire economy is going to go to shit, most of those sources of income, if not all of them, are going to go down.
Exactly. Correct.
So, I mean, diversifying in that context really doesn't make much. You're not making a very sound argument there.
Yeah, it is. Think about it from this perspective. If I have 100 businesses, I have 110 after these as sources of income specifically that I've invested in or that I bought and own. If 5 of my businesses lose 50% of their income, 10 of my businesses lose 10% of their income, and all the rest lose 28% of the income, I still have income across the board from all of these sources. They're obviously not at their original performance. Now, if you were one of the businesses that owned one of the lots that were 50% reduction, that would be absolutely devastating to you if that was your only source of income.
So the question here is not just income. If you have all those businesses that are going down, the question is how many are into black? How many are actually giving you money versus you paying them money?
All of them. All of them are income producing.
Even after those kind of numbers, even after a 25% loss, 50% loss.
If I took a 50% loss, they'd still be income generating.
you would still be net positive. I find that hard. Like, where are you finding these wonderful deals that
They're
you know,
small
despite not
businesses.
what?
They're small businesses, or if they're not small businesses, then they're investments on a dividend basis. And so
I'm
if you
struggling in this economy. Help me! I'm only making a massive profit. Please, someone, please bail me out.
Think about it from this perspective. One of the two two of the two businesses. Okay, this is kind of morbid, but two of the businesses, a cemetery and a funeral home. We've got people dropping left and right. Business is only improving. Not that I want business to improve. That's one of the few businesses that I hope we never do business together. Like, and if we do, it's a very long time from now. But businesses like those are recession resistant. Those are the type of investments that I make. Accounting, you still have to pay your taxes, but because of certain programs like the PPP program, for instance, a lot of people are going to accountants to ask them for assistance. Accountants will still charge you a service to process your PPP loans, but that's an increase in business. And so where it may not be standard tax services, it's PPP servicing, which is on top of standard revenue. And so revenue goes up. And so these are the types of businesses that I invest in, or services that are recession resistant or recession immune, because you're never going to not die. It doesn't matter what market condition you're in. You're going to die. It's just a question of when you're going to die.
But that's also those kind of like the cemetery example. That also seems to be something that will only make more money during a
plague.
Even if it wasn't just a plague.
Say what it is. Like, if more people die, I make more money. Like, that's terrible.
I was going to say, even if it was just a recession, even without the plague, there would be a higher death rate.
But or a financial collapse because the suicide rates skyrocket.
So what you're saying is your risk hedging, your special,
your so diversified,
recession-resistant investment will only be recession-resistant as long as we never have a cure for the plague.
Even if you have a cure for the plague, my other businesses will excel. And because of that, they will pick up in business and the others will return back to normal performance.
I know. Yeah. I was just,
just a quick interjection here, but for those of you who are curious about how that works or how that's done at a larger scale like a hedge fund, I highly recommend you look into people like Ray Dalio. He's a world-famous hedge fund manager. And I also recommend for people who actually want to learn a lot about investing to go watch and study people like Peter Lynch and Ray Dalio and Warren Buffett, because they have tons of free content on places like YouTube that you can consume all that content for free and learn how the best and brightest in the industry and most successful are performing and what they're doing and how they do what they do. But that's my personal advice in terms of mentors for finance.
I personally just started getting onto this whole track when I know my last word, Adrian. I understand it's been going on for a while.
Okay.
I personally started getting into this. I found this website called Mr. Money Mustache.
Yes, such a good site. Go there.
Yes. It has a wealth of amazing advice for people, like everyday people, or if you even get an
and the FIRE community. They have a really good FIRE community.
Yeah. So, Mr. Money Mustache, fantastic wealth of information, advice for finance, just being able to put yourself on financial independence, even if you're not even in the stock market. Great advice there. Highly recommend it. That's my final word on the topic. I imagine everyone here is sick of by now.
All right. I have 3 little items, and I think they're not going to take too long because I'm more interested in them than other people. What is happening with these Chinese seeds that are showing up various places? Does anybody know?
Yeah, that's called this. Oh God, there's a term for it. In essence, what they're doing is they're sending seeds to people in order to send a product to somebody that was effectively paid for that's incredibly low cost. So they can then use that to leave a review on online store sources that were sold to a specific country or region. In order to artificially bolster their numbers, that has to be verified by a transaction with a tracking number to prove that it was actually both sold and successfully delivered. And so that's what that is. And there's a term for it. I think it's called blanketing or something.
It's not blanketing, but I forget the term.
Yeah, but in essence, it's just artificially bolstering the reviews so that they can probably scam somebody with some other crappy product.
So it's not biological warfare?
No, God, no.
No, it's like you're looking at Amazon, verified purchase. Are you sure?
Yeah.
But the
so
people
those seeds are like bonsai trees and shit. I actually bought some because and To be fair, some of those seeds that I recognize, they're really great seeds. Because some of them are like little bonsai orange trees and crazy stuff. Like they're like desk trees, but they'll grow oranges, and like you'll actually have oranges growing on your desk. It's pretty cool. I don't personally recommend the ones that you don't recognize though. So don't just randomly plant the seeds.
Well, it's also the practice is pretty common over in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe. It's not been as common in the United States. But then again, you don't necessarily know who the verified purchaser is where the verified purchaser lives when you're looking at Amazon or eBay or like.
But the people aren't verified purchasers though, because they're not the ones ordering it.
Brushing. The term is called brushing.
Yes, that is the term. Yes.
There is another. I've seen this before as well. What they've done is they will list an item. Like I've seen like counterfeit books, and they'll list them for $500, insane prices, and someone will buy it with a compromised account and pay for it, and that way the person who sells it gets that money. And I've heard because of they can like do like a secondary market as well, so they can like double dip it. I don't know how that works. It sounds kind of fishy, but the primary method is it's sold and basically by fraud. And because that person has that money in their account, they cash out and bam, they're in the clear. They've made a fraudulent sale of an actual product. I've heard of people like they'll have random packages show up at their doorstep of like, what is this thing? And they'll find it and it's something listed for insane prices or yeah.
But how are they a verified purchaser if they weren't the one that actually ordered it?
Because it's bought by their account.
Yeah.
All right. How does someone get access to their account to buy something that they don't want?
They breach your account by getting your credentials.
So are you telling me the people who are getting these seeds have had some account breached?
No, those are literally just people who are getting random items sent to them.
No, they're saying they're the verified purchaser, not the verified receiver.
Yeah. So for instance, Adrian, to put it in a quick perspective, and sorry to cut you out there, Live Beef, but what I can do is I can go literally to I can go to the U.S. Postal Service and I can randomly buy a mailing list, and on that mailing list, I can literally just create a bunch of bogus accounts and then assign them to that address, and then add a payment method to that account, and then buy crap from myself. And so I recycle most of my money minus the platform fees. And then I'll mail you that product to your address, your actual real address. And then what's happening is places like Amazon are actually validating against their shipping service to certify that the product that they got bought was actually shipped to that address.
Then you
verified purchase.
You can put anyone's address as the receiver on Amazon. I've sent
and I can get your name wrong. It doesn't matter because it's shipped the address, not the person.
Yeah, I've sent packages to a friend of mine beforehand from using my Amazon account. I mean, Amazon doesn't care.
Yeah, because as long as they're getting paid and they collect their fee, they don't care. And so it's what's ending up happening though is with the brushing scam is say for instance I'm trying to sell something like a $200,000 item or something like a Learjet, but it's not actually a Learjet, so I'm lying. But I'll brush my account, build up a huge amount of reputation from all these verified sales of all these products that I've sold to you, but then I'll swap out the item description and the item image. And so what was plant seeds before is now a Learjet. And so I've sold thousands of Learjets that are all verified purchases. So when someone's looking for a big ticket item, oh, it's a $200,000 Learjet instead of $500,000. I'll buy this Learjet, but then when I buy that, they'll burn the account and they'll keep the money. And then the recovery team for the fraud services with Amazon can't get the $200K back.
So basically, it's a fraud way of getting a good rep on some.
Exactly, they're effectively inflating the rep artificially to ensure that they have a trustworthy appearance, so that they can then nail you for a big ticket item and then run with the money.
So if I plant one in my house in a pot, it's not going to turn into Seymour.
No, it's not going to turn into or it shouldn't turn into some random super deadly plant. They probably just went to some local God, what is that? Tractor Supply or their equivalent of it, and bought a whole bunch of bags of seeds and like volume bags, like 200 pounds or whatever, and then broke it up into the teeny tiny plastic packets, and then that's what they're shipping. It'll be like 3 cents for shipping and like 2 cents worth of seeds, and then that'll be like 5 cents total per purchase, and they'll do 10,000 purchases for less than 10 grand, and then for less than 10 grand they bought a high level reputation where they'll scam you for 200,000 or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for the explanation on that.
Yeah.
And because of this, they might not even use a compromised account. They might just say put something that's up for say $1 or less than $1, and then they'll buy it themselves using another account. They'll create a bunch of spam accounts and
Yeah, and then they'll buy
themselves.
their own items, exactly, and then they'll leave themselves reviews. And the issue is Amazon intentionally knows about that, but they don't do anything about it because transactions are occurring and they're generating a profit from it.
Yeah, I mean there is a cost involved with doing that because Amazon takes a percentage, but in the grand scheme of things, it's very small considering they're gonna
it's a
end up
dollar
making
item with a 2% fee. Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna make several $1,000s more. Well, it's a few dollars now.
Yeah, and Amazon's overarching policy, which is we're not responsible for vendors that sell in the marketplace. It's a buyer beware market, and it's all certified as third party, so we're not actually involved in that transaction at all. We just make the transaction available to be made.
Yeah.
But you're the one who actually has to do the transaction and make the choices. And
To
so
be fair,
they kind of
Amazon
delegate
does
responsibility.
Amazon does have a policy of it has to match the description. So if they try that and doesn't, then Amazon can work with you, but Amazon's basically getting scammed too because by the time the money clears, it's already out of the bank account, and Amazon has no way of collecting
way
it
of
from them.
recovering it. Exactly.
So it's out of their pocket now because they've facilitated it.
Yeah, and that's why Amazon carries a ridiculous sized insurance policy for effectively fraud. But ultimately, the amount of money Amazon makes off of the Amazon Marketplace, they just don't care.
Yeah,
and not just that, but also fulfilled too.
They've nearly tripled their amount of tripled the amount of income. No, they've the amount of growth they've had in the past 10 years in Amazon is equal to the amount of growth they've had in the past 3 months.
Yeah. The Bezos doesn't even miss the money that he gave to his ex-wife, at all.
So Amazon has more than doubled in its size. Amazon's a $1.5 trillion company.
Yeah, it's a monster.
It wasn't that long ago. It was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe tops. That it was an historic event that we're going to have our first $1 trillion company. Or they talked about, if we combine all these tech stocks together, they equal $1 trillion. And then here comes Amazon barreling through with now $1.5 trillion valuation.
And Microsoft, I think they've been there for a while. Microsoft has because of esports.
Microsoft, nice try. Microsoft esports.
Microsoft, look at their market cap from esports and the gaming stuff that they're doing.
Okay, esports regardless, esports is not exactly where Microsoft's the bulk of Microsoft's income is coming from.
Oh no, not at all. Yeah, but it's given them a lot of big pushes here recently in terms of hype because it's a new market expansion, and so it's feeding into the hype machine because they're diversifying their income further. But their market cap is 1.55 trillion right now as of current Webull Nice.
Microsoft's 1.55 trillion.
Yeah, 1.55.
Shit, I didn't realize Microsoft was that high. I know that their cloud computing with Azure is pretty much what propelled them from, decades of over a decade of mediocrity, to wow. And I realized that it's given a lot of investor confidence.
Well, one of the things that they did to expand themselves was they issued a dividend, and then after they issued the dividend, they started to expand in other ways to draw in more investors. And so right now they pay like a $2 and some change dividend, which isn't bad. It's not a great percentage basis. It's incredibly low percent-wise. It's like 1%, I think. Yeah, 1%. I just looked, but it's exactly 1%. But it's so insignificant. But at the same time, it's still a dividend. That's a tech stock at the same time, and so that made a major draw for a lot of places that were income based. And so that's why Apple did the same thing, and they pay a dividend too. But because of that and diversification, it started to be added to a lot of institutional holdings for retirement accounts and mutuals. And so right now, there's over 4,000 institutions holding Microsoft in their portfolio or in their index funds. And so it's bought all the time, literally all the time. And so there's a lot of massive market pressure driving up the price because purchases are made like clockwork by all of these institutions. And we're talking like Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan. We're talking Citadel, like huge companies, Vanguard.
Of a massive market downturn. I'm sorry, Adrian. I'm sorry. In the event that's not market downturn, I'd have a lot more confidence in Amazon than I would in Microsoft. People need physical goods, but as businesses go under, there's going to be less and less need for cloud anything.
I don't know. I'm mixed. My thing is more people are going to turn to entertainment like they do in depressions historically to distract themselves from the fact that they're poor.
So porn.
Netflix, sure.
Porn, Netflix, alcohol, which is one of my holdings. I have holdings in Jack Daniels, and they're
I've talked to my local liquor stores, and they've been saying that despite them still getting business has still been down. The
liquor store's business may be down, but they still have to have products on the shelf. And
that's true. And people are still buying, for better or worse.
Yeah, I've tried to cut that out largely because acid reflux and such also became a big part of my budget.
Now, go back to the point where I was talking about Amazon. Something else to consider that you see a lot too is if you do like fulfilled by Amazon stuff, basically Amazon has it in their warehouse and they commingle all their products. So, like, say you want to sell a pair of Adidas shoes, and say they're actual Adidas, you put them in there, they get lumped into a pile of everything that matches that description. So, which could be from Adidas, it could be from a distributor, it could be from a counterfeiter too. So you'll see lots of fake and real products commingled together, and that's an easy way to sneak it in there as well. Is you buy it, and it's because there's real and fake products linked together. All the reviews are going to be like, some people are like, oh, it's fake. Oh, it's real. So like, oh well, the price is good. I might get a real, I might get a fake one. I don't know, and buy.
I don't know about that. I don't know if that's true or not. But the good news
you don't know which part's true.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, but I can find out. My brother used to work for Amazon.
The commingling? So the commingling thing is absolutely true. I could say that for a first-hand fact. It is true.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, like he used to work in the warehouses because he used to run the logistics operations for several Amazon warehouses. And there's actually, cool enough, they're building a logistics warehouse not far from me. So like less than 5 miles away. So now I get Amazon Prime within the same hour. It's pretty great. Like that's one upgrade, I guess. They're building it right off of a highway access point not far from me. I'd say maybe 5-10 minutes at best. So that's gonna be great.
That's why I know it's getting a little bit late. Sorry to cut you off there.
No, you're fine. What was the next topic, Adrian?
Yeah.
All right. Next topic I have is have any of you ever used BitChute? By the way, despite what some dumbasses in InfoSec say, I just one dumb person say something when I suggested BitChute. She said that's the YouTube equivalent of Gab and Patreon. He would like it. Because it's got this impression that everybody on fucking BitChute's a Nazi. That's not fucking true. Most of the shit has nothing to do with that. But it's a low censorship platform, so some unsavory characters do show up. Welcome to a low censorship platform.
There's child porn on Facebook. What's her point?
Yeah, which is an idiot.
Child porn on Twitter. There's child porn on
there's a couple idiots
every platform.
saying similar shit. Unfortunately, one of my friends tweeted me with the person tagged who I think I'd already blocked because she didn't realize this person's a jackass.
That's ridiculous. It's not true. Yeah, it's not true. The Nazi label flies on. I've noticed this personally. The Nazi label flies on literally every platform that tolerates conservatives or Christians or anyone that's pro-life.
But anyway, BitChute is basically a video service that uses a BitTorrent-like system where while you're watching a video, you might very well be sharing out some of that video. So
no, it doesn't. So they say that, but no, you're actually getting it from BitChute's servers. You're not sharing it via BitTorrent when you visit BitChute website.
That was one of the selling points that they said.
Yes, it was one of the selling points that they said. That's not how it works in practice, though.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we could pull a torrent down and see where the packet data comes from. It's got to come from somewhere.
Well, there's WebTorrent, so if you're looking at if you're looking, you have to look at your upload data.
So why do they claim that's what's happening, especially since it doesn't include the bandwidth costs?
I don't know if it's happening in small parts, but for the most part, that's not really what's going on.
I don't think
they originally claimed that because there is money to be had. There is a market for people who hear the word decentralized.
Yeah, my thing would be if that were the case. I know BitChute has all kinds of actually torrented content that's copyrighted, and so they would have DMCA issues out the wazoo like Pirate Bay does. And so I haven't heard them constantly in the news, and so I would think that they're just another seeding platform that points to that they're operating as a gateway proxy maybe, but the actual content's probably not located on their systems. They're just providing a conduit to that location through some kind of mapping. Which is what Pirate Bay shifted to.
Yeah, I was archiving some of my stuff that I uploaded to YouTube. I had it set to automatically mirror to BitChute, but that seemed to have been broken. But one reason I did that is because they're a low censorship platform. But one of the things I want to mention was there's a phone app now called BitSlide, which it's better than the actual more official BitChute client because BitSlide lets you turn off your phone screen and still listen to it. And they're working on casting to like Chromecast and Fire Stick and other things. I talked to one of the developers. But if people are interested in a BitChute and you want to use your phone, I highly recommend checking out BitSlide.
All right. I would actually like to meet them. I would like to invest in something like that. That would be a good investment.
If you check out my recent feed, there's some communications where I've retweeted them and
video anti-censorship is really big right now in terms of consumer demand. So I would really like to invest in something like that.
Yeah, there are people who've been killed from other places that seem to exist on BitChute still, no problem. Because there's a few major YouTubers like Stefan Molyneux and Atheism is Unstoppable. Atheism Unstoppable is interesting though. Apparently, he got kicked off of YouTube and he got hired on by Censored TV. Are you familiar with Censored TV?
I've heard of it.
Basically, it's something that Gavin McInnes started.
Yeah.
But now
Gavin, like McGinnis, like Proud Boys McGinnis?
Yes, that dude.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Censored TV. .TV, he originally started as Free Speech TV, but then he got sued because there was another entity out there called Free Speech TV. He had to change it to Censored TV.
Okay. I'd be interested in looking into that too.
But yeah, if you want look at the
as far as BitChute being, labeled alt-right or Nazi stuff, I would not consider it to the same degree as Gab or whatever that new thing is.
Parlor? Are you trying to say Parlor?
Yes, I forgot the name of it.
Parlor is not an alt-right or Nazi thing either.
Weren't they so desperate for people who weren't, Trump supporters that they were offering? Yeah, I'm kind of sworn they were either Parlor or some other one that Trump personally promoted that was offering like
$20,000. Yeah, you're talking about Parlor.
They were offering $20,000 for some leftist to join their site.
Yeah, for diversification, because a lot of the people that are right facing like me, I moved over to Parlor. Like I'm pro-life because I'm Native American, and we have a very different perspective on what life is. Most people perceive life as human life. We perceive life as all forms of life. So I hate spiders. I have an astronomical amount of spiders on my door, but because of my personal beliefs, I won't kill them because they're outside, technically.
I hate to tell you, buddy, but if you ever change your diet, you're committing genocide. the amount of life in your gut you are extinguishing is in trillions, if not.
It's a very complicated way to live every day, but it's a give and take.
Like the thing, if your goal is to make sure you don't kill a single thing at all whatsoever, you have your work cut out for you.
Well, it's more so maliciously or intentionally trying to not kill things, unless it's specifically for food. Like I won't kill for sport. I refuse to kill for sport.
Okay, I can respect that.
Yeah. So like when we kill something, for instance,
except for deer, which
well, like for instance with deer or fish, I hunt and I fish. But when I go and I fish, I'll catch a fish. We'll eat the fillets, but then I'll take the bones and I'll grind those up or crush them up, and I'll take the scales and the skin and I'll throw that into a compost and I'll turn that into fertilizer and use that to grow crop. Like we don't waste stuff. We don't just toss the rest of it in a trash can and ship it off to the dump. We leverage the fullest extent of the body. as traditional practice has always done, except with buffalo. We don't have any buffalo here. I don't have a spear, and I'm not going hunting for buffalo. But like for fishing or deer, or if I grow crop, I'll harvest all the husks and stuff, and I'll turn that into compost, and I'll bring that back to the ground, and I'll use fish excrement and worm excrement through vermicast, and I'll leverage that as natural fertilizer. I don't use chemical fertilizers or enhancers unless I have to. And even when I do that, that's extremely rare and super sparingly, and typically only to save plants, to keep them specifically from dying. And that's very, very rare, but that's to preserve its life.
Okay, so like the life is more along the lines of life you can visually see.
Yeah, like physical life.
microscope.
So like my raspberry plants outside, I would never go out of my way to kill them or let them die on purpose, even though maintaining them is a nightmare, and it's unlikely that I'll ever receive a fruit yield from them because of the temperature conditions that I live in. I will never receive fruit from them. They'll never be fruit bearing. But most people with that issue as a gardener would simply just discard the plants and let them die. Morally, I can't do that. I have to keep them alive because they're life, and I should protect that and preserve the garden and the lands that I live on. And so I maintain raspberry plants that I'll never get raspberries from.
All right, I mean, I can absolutely respect the perspective, and I was just trying to go with an absurd extreme with referring to the gut biome.
Yeah, but yeah, life is sacred to us, as Native Americans specifically saying us. Life has a larger meaning than what most people perceive it as.
What if I just told you I was doing a search on Amazon for a book called Contingency Cannibalism? Come on. I tried to get my library to order that a while back, but they balked at it. Okay, that brings me, since we've gone from BitChute, alternate media. What all stuff do you use as far as alt media that's not your normal YouTube, Facebook, Twitter stuff? For instance, I have a Paula account. We have a BitChute account. Yes, at one time I created a Gab account and never used it. I use Telegram for some stuff. What lower censorship alt media do you all use? Alt tech stuff.
I mean, Discord is common. I like it. It's still, despite the for those of you who don't know, Discord does not remove content unless it's reported to them. There has been more organized efforts in recent years for people to report content they don't like. I'm not talking about illegal content, but content that
racism,
illegal, but,
or child porn or stuff like that.
I'm not. Well, child porn. I think they still do scanning for child porn, but
the problem with child porn's been kind of a question one because there's a bunch of furries who run, and I know Liz, you're a furry, so there's a question, but there's a bunch of furries who run it there, and they've allowed cub content for a very long time, saying it's not child porn.
So one of their admins openly tried to make a distinction between lolicon and cub. For those who don't know, the difference, lolicon is essentially drawings of underage children, usually sexualized, and cub is the furry version of that. And back when some years back, Discord tried to make an exception for the furry version of that, saying that like there are jurisdictions where they that it's legal to have the cub stuff because they're not human, and therefore it wouldn't fall afoul of child pornography laws because they're not human.
Well,
and then there was enough of an outcry that finally Discord relented and said, "Fuck it, fine. We'll consider cub banned along with lolicon." And essentially, what?
My issue with lolicon and I guess what you would call what you said cub depictions. I'm sorry, I don't want to.
Cub.
I just want to make sure I said it right.
It's underage furry. It's underage furry. That's what it means.
And I'm totally against pedophilia of any kind. Absolutely adamant about it. Very, very conservative. Extremely against misuse and mistreatment of children because I was sexually abused as a child. But lolicon treads an incredibly dangerous line because technically it's not a picture, it's a drawing. And so that plays semantics, which I don't like people who play those damn reindeer games. But at the same time, from a company's perspective, they have to go by what the letter of the law says. And so from their perspective, I can understand, at least not tolerate or accept, but at least understand from a legal perspective why they would allow that content, at least even initially, until complaints came in, and then they would react, because then they could say as a company, okay, well, hey, we got some complaints, we're banning it because the users said, not because we made a decision that infringed on your rights to speech or expression, but because specifically the user said. And part of the reason why I say that specifically is because if you look at Roman culture, there are a lot of depictions of children and older paintings and styles. And if you look at some types of angelic depictions, cupids can be misinterpreted as children, even if they are seraphim. And so things like that, where stuff like Cub would be acceptable because seraphim aren't technically humans. They're not children, they're angels. And so from that perspective, I can understand where they would have a lot of issues, because if you do it for one group, you have to do it for the other. The old saying goes, in for a penny, in for a pound. And so if you're saying, well, this type of depiction at all is unacceptable, then all of a sudden you just wiped out a ton of stuff that came from multiple religions because they believe in angels. And then all of a sudden
I think you are putting too much thought into this. I'm pretty certain that the admin, the Discord admin who was defending Cub stuff, just jacked off to the material.
I can't speak for that desire.
Eventually relented.
It, but I don't know.
Eventually relented because, like other furries that run certain businesses, I'm not going to name, they don't want to be known as defending the material, even if they personally like the stuff. So, or in this case for Discord, since the admin's already known for defending the stuff, they don't want the brand of the platform to be synonymous with the unsavory material.
Content, yeah.
So that's essentially what happened there. Yeah.
No, I understand that. But yeah, but that's really
the law of the red and the Cub stuff is really very ship posters would probably have a field day if more of them knew.
Yeah. Oh yeah, shit posters galore. But one of the issues that I have,
it's because like the places that host Cub porn are like hosted in either Australia or the UK, because since furries are not considered human, the Cub porn is considered animal husbandry. It's considered animal husbandry stuff. So
again, that's walking a really thin line of interpretation.
But that's the legal interpretation that apparently is used, and so far apparently it's worked somehow. I do not know if there have been any court cases that have actually. I don't know if there's any case law behind that or any legislation that actually affirms that at all, because I don't study Australian or UK law.
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't either. But at the same time, it's like from a moral perspective, like I just can't get behind something like that. But at the same time, I'm also very much so pro freedom of speech and freedom of life. And so while I have my personal beliefs, I will never change my personal beliefs or sacrifice them for someone else's opinions. But at the same time, to a limited extent, which is incredibly generous in terms of length, I can respect the fact that your opinions differ from mine, as well as your desires and lifestyles. And so I don't believe that I should ever force my lifestyles upon you. But at the same time, I have my limits to where you become an actual danger to society, or like children are now put at risk or stuff like that. That's where I draw the line, where actual harm can be done, typically, is the line for me.
Yeah, I hear you. My view on the whole thing is I don't know of many arguments against the material that couldn't readily be repurposed to claim violent media encourages violence. Because the claim is that watching the stuff incentivizes you to act out the stuff.
I think that's called fetishization, I think is the term that's used.
Well,
fetishization. Yeah, where they have a fetish for it, and then they satisfy, I guess is the word to use, that desire, and then eventually they hit some kind of like diminish. I think from psychological perspective, there's some kind of diminishing returns, and then like eventually fantasizing about it no longer satisfies that nature, and then the next natural step is to actually go out and enact that behavior in person with whatever the desire is, which for me is like definitely not within my moral spectrum.
That kind of brings to mind a subculture from Japan, which is pretty much saying 2D greater than 3D. They're essentially people who have completely eschewed not even the concept of, not just the concept of sex, but even looking at nude pictures of real people, to the point where they only are attracted to drawings.
That's strange. Is that getting into like the hentai sector and stuff within the Japanese
That is
culture?
from the hentai sector.
Okay.
There is some bleed over that into the U.S., but it's primarily in Japan.
Yeah.
So I think human psychology is a little bit weird there.
I wouldn't say weird. I don't want to be disrespectful. But I would say it's definitely uniquely different compared to Americans, which, to be fair, cultures around the world, which I try to be observant to some extent, are very radically different in the U.S., which I think is one of the biggest privileges of being in this country, is the fact that, relatively speaking, our levels of freedoms of expression are radically wider in breadth and wider in depth of our allotments to express ourselves within our desires and within the legal limitations of the Constitution and our respective federal and state laws, as compared to other countries.
We have our freedom of speech. The culture of freedom of speech, even despite the modern day challenges, is still definitely the envy of much of the free world.
And I think that that's had major impacts into our culture as a society, for good and for bad. Like we're very artistic, we're very creative, but at the same time, well, the negative consequences are we have a major issue with entitlement, for instance. But that stems from the positive and the negatives of our incredibly, I guess, empowered culture. We're very empowered as private citizens as compared to in other countries that are empowered as a collective, like more socialistic countries.
I might talk about that off air.
Okay, I was going to say, in isolated circumstances, some countries might have more freedom of speech in certain areas than we do in the U.S., but those are generally the exception rather than the rule. The one area that comes to mind recently is Japan was, and not talking about porn right now, Japan with regards to animation, manga, and voice acting. There was recently a relatively famous manga artist recently talked with the Japanese Diet. The Diet is, I know it's a strange name for what it is. It's the Japanese lawmaking body. Recently had a hearing at the Japanese Diet about foreign influences, primarily Western, some South Korean and Chinese, that threaten their freedom of speech. The thing that kind of really galvanized this was the whole push to have only African Americans voice African American characters in animation in the West, and that really, put a lot of fear in manga artists and also anime artists and directors in Japan, because it's kind of like, are we going to get elves to voice elves now? What the fuck is this?
Yeah. I mean, we can get dinosaurs to do the T-Rex, but
there's one thing
5 movies on that one.
There's one thing about Japanese censorship. Maybe it's changed over the years that I don't understand. They can show a rape scene, but they have to blur out the crotch. I don't.
That is still the case.
That's still the case.
Arbitrarily, and that is not consistently enforced. And it does seem to be a little bit more biased against female genitalia.
I think Yeah, and to clarify that, I think it's in regards to what they will show for women versus what they'll show for men.
Well, so I don't really know exactly where the lines is because there is some degree of censorship for male parts in animation.
Yeah.
But not hentai, but at the same time, like in Japan, they have a fertility parade where there's a gigantic penis floats. You have penis popsicles. You have people dressing up as penises left and right.
That's
it
funny.
Is dicks as far as the eye can see.
Well, they're more open sexually in regards to sexual, I guess, sexual desire and sexual enactment. Consent being a major consideration. But one of the other things that I know, based on what Nintendo recently announced, is that nudity. They're far more comfortable with nudity in their media than other countries like the EU nations as well as the US. They're far more comfortable with depictions, and I think that stems from a much more mature culture than what we have in the EU or the US, respectively. And I also think it might have something to do with differences in religious beliefs and ideologies.
Could be.
I can't say on that one for sure.
One of Japan's mythological pieces is literally an image of a woman being raped by an octopus, and this was the original tentacle rape scene, and apparently it was a symbol of good luck or something. I don't know the specifics around it, but apparently it's famous. I need to look that up, but that is tentacle rape has been a thing for Japan for many, many, many generations. Drawings, that is. I can hear the awkward silence, which makes me a little bit concerned. Do you not understand Japan and tentacle rape are kind of synonymous with?
Oh, no. I'm familiar. Sorry, I muted myself so there wasn't background noise.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the tentacle porn and the tentacle rape stuff. That's typically the first thing that people they make fun of and that leads them down the hentai road, and they end up in weird places. But yeah, the tentacle porn. That's typically the first kind of hentai that people think hentai, they think tentacle porn.
Yeah.
But yeah,
we're at the hour and a half or 2 hour and a half mark, so I'm going to end the streams. I'm going to talk to you for a little bit, then I'm going to go to sleep.
Okay.
All right, everybody on the cast, listening to the cast on YouTube, have a good evening and see y'all next Wednesday.
Later.
Bye bye.